Yeah, I one time did a talk in front of 500 Korean War veterans. They're all old as shit, like 80 and 90. My grandpa was part of that group.
Oh, really?
Invited me, and they had no mic in this gigantic room. And like I mean, I couldn't like speak the next day. I mean, they all heard me, but I was fucking screaming to get them all to hear me.
You gotta project the voice as best as you can.
I can do it, I can get loud. It's not too big of a problem.
Right. Well, and feel free, you can.
Right,
you can
let me see before we might want to wait a minute here for this pizza. How's that? Or else we're gonna be burning.
It works for me. I'm already recording, so it's all good, man. Oh, it's just nice to be out of that car, and it's literally an honor to be on the boat, man. I've dreamt of this day.
Yeah, well, welcome aboard. I've been trying to get you to come as crew.
Cheers. Yeah, I know.
Like a couple of years now. You'd rather work in a boatyard in Maine or Massachusetts or some shit.
Rockland, Maine, baby. Well, that is one of the funnest jobs I've ever had. I'm not gonna lie. But no, this summer I was up in northern Michigan doing the old water sports stuff. And
what is the old water sports stuff?
Oh, just running a water sports center, and a bunch of sailing instructors, tons of boats, chaos, guests up the wazoo, and I don't know. That was sort of how I sort of cut my teeth on the whole sailing thing. I learned how to sail, and then like 2 years later, I was an instructor, and then it just kept going and going. But the place was pretty run down. I hadn't been there in like 10 years, and not that makes too much difference, but they're usually dealing with college kids that are just trying to have fun for the summer.
So what are you doing next summer?
Next summer, I have no idea yet.
You going to Greenland?
Is that your plan?
Oh yeah, of course. That's what I always do. That's what I do. I go north.
I don't know. It's going to be interesting because this is the first year that I'm not launching Sparrow. So I
heard you're selling her.
I don't know about that. Yeah,
Did you put her up for sale? $35,000. That's what it's. That was what I heard.
Really?
That's not true?
No, that's not true.
Oh shit! Someone told me you had her up for sale for $35,000.
Oh, if I could get $35,000 for it, jeez, that'd be amazing. No, it's it needs to be repowered. I need new sails. I can get away with the engine, but I don't know if anybody else could because I've had to dink around with it for so long. I know all its little picadillos and stuff.
Right.
It's just an old Perkins 4108.
I had my last boat out of Perkins 4108. You must be familiar with Transatlantic Diesel. They're like the Perkins gurus.
Oh,
they're out of there. Well, if you ever need some parts, they know more about Perkins than Perkins. The secretary who picks up the phone, her name is Diane because I've dealt with them so many times. Like she knows every single part of a 4108. Like she could probably rebuild it in her sleep, and she's the secretary.
Oh, well.
Like, let alone
I'll have to get that
Marcus,
information then.
the English guy who actually runs it. My Sabre, I have a Sabre 212C, which is what would happen if a Ford Lehman had a baby with a Perkins. So it's a Ford block with Perkins parts essentially.
Yeah.
So I still deal with Transatlantic Diesel to this day. I used to be with my 4108. Now it's with this. You can't get parts for this damn thing. It was a weird engine, marinized in England.
Right.
Years ago, like they don't, they stopped making these things forever. It's just sort of that process. I think Ford Lehman might have went to Mermaid. I think it was for a little while, and then Sabre, or there's like been several sort of offshoots of that engine. Nobody is marinizing Ford blocks, I don't think. I don't know of anybody that's doing it now. It's like Kubota is kind of taken over a lot of it.
Right.
There's a lot of variations of marinized Kubota blocks, and then you have
John Deere and John Deere were like the bigger ones. Those were the ferry boat engines we'd use down at Bitter End Yacht Club.
John Deere is what I want to repower my boat with.
Really?
Yeah, they're the only
yellow monsters.
They're the only ones out there.
That's good.
That is making a 230 horse that you can run at full RPM for 24 hours, and you can do unlimited hours. So mine is a commercial grade engine, but even then, I'm only supposed to be doing 2,000 hours a year on it. I did about 1,600 this year, so I'm still under the threshold.
Okay, yeah.
But
why do they limit? Is that a limit to the next time it has to get like fully serviced?
It's just like the amount of wear and tear they want you to put on an engine. So essentially, it's kind of a weird thing because you don't get into this stuff with normal sailboats. Like you get a sailboat, you get a Yanmar or whatever, a Westerbeek or a Beta or whatever it is.
Yeah.
All of that is recreational grade marine diesel. They just don't tell you that, and nobody really cares,
Yeah.
And then there's commercial grades, and then with commercial grades, there's an L class, an M class, there's M1, M2, M3. There's all these variants. So when you get into like 700 horsepower diesels, they're like commercial grade. Even with that, like I say, there's a lot of different variants within how heavy duty it is. Meaning,
and what its purpose is.
Yeah,
like
and so
it's ferry, or if it's this, that, or the other thing.
And it's how many hours in 24 hours can you run it wide open is one of the things, which I never run my engine wide open anyways. Like, I just hate to do it.
I couldn't even imagine doing
that. So someone will be like 6 hours and 24. Someone will be like 18. To find one that's 24 and 24 with this John Deere 230 horse is just, unheard of. And it's unlimited hours. Basically, what they did is they took a 350 horsepower motor and dumbed it down.
Yeah.
And so that's why, and it only runs at 2,300 RPM. So 2,300 RPM, you can run that all day.
And that's flat out.
That's flat out wide open. It's 2,300.
Okay.
And that puts out 230 horse and is basically indestructible. I think it's like a 7.5 liter or something. I don't know, some massive. Mine is 6.7, I think.
The one in here.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. But anyways, it would be. Now it does cost about $50,000, and that's not the installation.
They're not cheap, man. They're
not
cheap. I looked at trying to get a rebuilt Perkins up in Maine, and even with all the connections through the boatyard and stuff, a rebuilt one was going to be about $9,000. Even if I gave them my old one, it was just
$9,000. That's way too much.
Well, I don't know.
A rebuilt Perkins 4108 should be $6,000, but it depends on how they consider rebuilt. In other words, if you were to take a Perkins 4108 out of your boat, hand it to a guy, say, rebuild this, please, he'll charge you an hourly thing, and then it would get up into the $9,000.
Yeah.
But
maybe that was it. Maybe it was $9,000 to rebuild my engine.
Or they rebuilt something else and they're trying to get the money out of the labor. But typically, like a rebuild should be, for a Perkins, it should be about $6,000. Actually, Transatlantic Diesel can probably get you a rebuilt one for around $6,000. They sell rebuilt 4108s.
I don't. Honestly, I most West sales now. I think most people have like betas in there.
Yeah,
they're the red ones, right?
Betas,
the Westerbeek or something.
The only problem with the beta.
Is beta Westerbeek?
No. So Westerbeek is red also. And and Westerbeek, like all the old Valiant 42s at Westerbeeks, Pearson 424s at Westerbeeks.
Yeah.
You don't see them as much anymore, but a lot of a Westerbeek generator is one of the better generators you can get. Like, it's on par with Northern Lights. And nothing is on par with Northern Lights. They're like the creme de la creme.
They're the best, yeah.
But if you can get a Westerbeek, it has about a 12-month backlog, and it's the same price. It's about $15,000 for like a 5 kW. They're really expensive.
Yeah.
And they're 3-cylinder, running 1,800 RPM. They're killer. But you don't see them put Westerbeeks in boats much. Like, manufacturers have kind of backed away. I'm not sure why. There was a Valiant 42 used to come with a 44-horse Westerbeek, and that one had issues where the engine block would crack. And obviously that's not good.
Yeah.
So, and people repowered, when you repower a Valiant 42, you usually put like a 50 or 55 Yanmar. Like the 55 Yanmar is a real common, because really, even with a 44 horse diesel in a Valiant 42,
you're not going to need that.
Well, you're motoring at like 5 knots.
Right.
Because but
you're going to get to hull speed with how many RPMs on that?
Well, you won't get. Hull speed on a Valiant 42 has got to be 7.5 or 8 or maybe 7, because they do have that kind of what do you call it? The now boats are all plumb bow, traditional bow, I guess you would call the length overall versus the waterline length. Right. I'm sure is quite a difference, but it's got to be at least 6, I would think, on a Valiant 42. It is technically a Valiant 42 is a Valiant 40.
Yeah,
they just added a bowsprit and called it a 42. It's literally a 40-foot boat. They just call it a 42.
You've always loved those boats. I've heard you talk about them before.
Well, when I was first getting into sailing, I had this thing for double enders, and part of it's like the beauty of double enders. Part of it's the mystique, where they're like the old Scandinavian Viking tradition, because the Vikings had the first double-ended boats.
Right.
And the idea that in heavy seas from behind you, which you get a lot of, like screaming down waves in the Southern Ocean, that's like the most extreme example of it, really.
Yep.
Those waves come and the stern will just kind of split the waves. Where my Pearson, my old 323 Pearson that I had, when I would fly down waves, and sometimes you get that boil, like on a big wave, you get kind of like a boiling action on top, sort of, where like boiling isn't maybe the right word, but you get maybe the top 5 or 6 feet or 3 feet or whatever it is.
Kind breaking and coming down.
Breaking and churning, and it would hit the back of the Pearson, which had a pretty flat large-ish transom,
Yeah.
and it would just shove me. It was like someone had a hand behind me just shoving the boat forward, and then you might broach or you need to get a drogue or whatever it is. A drogue will solve that problem, but the double enders,
it just curls, and sort of splits around the stern of Sparrow. I've seen that. I've been in the cockpit where a big breaker comes and it's like the ass end just goes up and all this white water right next to you. You're like, whoa.
Yeah. That's so there's that beauty. Now, there are arguments that some of them have a lack of buoyancy. You know, that was an argument against some of the Crelock designs, some of the Pacific Sea craft, that they were narrower in the stern, so they had less buoyancy. So if you look at a Valiant 42, they're kind of bulbous. They're double-ended, but the stern is more bulbous than a Crelock, than a Pacific Sea craft would be, or a Freya. Freya 39 is a great classic sort of double-ended boat also.
Well, what was the one that you helped Brian get? Was that Hershoff Pilot House? Is that what he's on?
Oh, yeah. No, he has down in the Carolinas.
Yeah.
He has a.
He'll love it. That we're talking.
That is
about
a Pacific Sea craft. That's a Pacific Sea craft pilot house.
Oh, okay.
Which you don't see. That's a very, very rare boat.
Yeah,
you don't see pilot house Pacific Sea craft.
Was that the last one you brokered?
No, the last one I sold was a Little Harbor 54. I think was the last one I sold. I got it to the point where I was selling bigger and bigger boats. I sold a Little Harbor 54 and a Tazwell 58 right near the end. I don't remember which deal went through before the other one.
Okay.
But it's funny. I got out of yacht broking right when I was starting to sell like $500,000 boats.
Just when you start to make some money.
Yeah, and the pandemic was coming, and everybody was buying boats during the pandemic, so it was like
the hottest time to be a broker. Yeah. There were more boats. Or no, there were less boats for sale. My buddy Mike, who was on the show, actually, shout out Mike. He's up in Newport, and he sells mostly motorboats and stuff. But he was like, "This is unbelievable." From 2020 to 2022.
That might have been a Hans Christian Pilot House. Now I think about it.
Hans Christian,
Brian. Brian. Now I think about it. Yeah, you're right. That was a Hans Christian Pilot House. Pacific Sea Craft. What I'm thinking, Pacific Sea Craft made some trawlers, which I don't know if many people have seen them or no. They tried to break into the powerboat trawler market.
Yes, I do remember.
They're kind of like a 40-footer. I don't know what size they are. They're not huge, but they're
high quality build though.
Yeah, those were good. Hans Christians are just they're of the same ilk, heavy duty built sort of things.
Yeah.
The door on that thing, I was like 100 pounds or something. The back door to get in and out. The companionway. It wasn't
it's huge. It's insane. It's and I don't know. We'd be Brian and I would hang out, and it was such a different feel to be in the cockpit and have that wall of that pilot house in front of you. I mean, you could stand there and look over it, but I'm so used to in Sparrow just being pretty much totally exposed. I just had a little footwell.
Yeah, and Valiant made a 42 pilot house that was similar, and that there's ups and downs to that part of that design, because it does, like if you're going to be puttering down the ICW, you got to stand up to see over it. The view is a little limited. Now, if I remember correctly, I believe he has inside steering, doesn't he?
Yeah, he has both. So
so in that case, it's not a big deal. Where the Valiant 42 pilot house did not have any inside steering at all. It was only outside, and that was all you got.
Yeah.
So
that's not great.
No, it's nice to have that option. So you got to repower the boat, do new rigging, new sails. It sounds like a pretty major refit would be necessary for your West sail.
For Old Sparrow. Well, I mean, I said, I can get away with the engine. If I was going to sell it, I wouldn't. I would, if I put the money in to get a new engine, I could probably charge another $15,000 on that boat. Because nobody wants to buy a boat with an engine that's all messed up.
Yeah, and Valiants do have not Valiants, freaking West Sails do have a pretty large variable with selling price.
Oh yeah, some of them are $10,000. Some of them are the highest one I ever saw was listed, I think, for like $180,000 or something.
Yeah, that's not going to happen.
It was pretty close.
Did they sell it for that though? I mean,
they sold it not quite that, but pretty damn close.
See, back when I was a broker, I used to be able to get in there and see what a boat actually sells for. It's like a back part of Yacht World, where you can get in how many days was it listed, what did it really sell for, what was the difference between asking price and reality, essentially.
Yeah.
But that must have been the nicest West Sail ever.
It was owned by I forget the guy's name, but essentially he had treated it like his baby, pulled it out of the water for a decade or so, and I think he contracted guys from Pacific Sea Craft to completely rebuild the entire interior, everything.
Oh, wow.
So they stripped it completely down and actually built it, because West Sail's they're really strong boats, but they built them, they were sort of like, there you go, there's your boat, great.
And some were factory interior, some weren't factory interior.
Yeah, but the craftsmanship of everything, they're just more bare bones. And so they weren't, like mine, my old man, he refers to my boat sounding like a popcorn machine, because every joint creaks, pops, groans. When it's in heavy weather, it's loud down below. It's just pop, pop, pop. But when I was on their boat, because I got to go on it for a little while and we went sailing and stuff, oh my God, it's just dead silent. Everything, everything was perfect. Well, it's really hard, though, to go from a boat that's like normal to a super high-end boat and just feel comfortable like setting a cup down. You're like, this is fresh, perfect varnish. I can't do that. On my boat, I don't even think twice, because, it's just...
I purposely did not varnish my table well.
Yeah, right?
No, I didn't. I didn't. I actually ran out of time. I need to revarnish. Like, you can see spots are like missing right in front of you.
It's all right, though.
Yeah. It gets used, man. His table gets used.
I always go back to when I was in my 20s. I used to get 15-foot or 13.5-foot Boston Whalers. Loved them. Buy a used old crummy one and just fix it up. Fresh paint job, all sorts of everything looked great. And for the first, it always just felt awesome. It looked awesome, but every time I used it, I had to clean it right afterwards. Every time I set something down in it, I had to worry about it scratching through the paint. And I actually didn't enjoy the boat as much until it kind of got its first bunch of dings and you didn't have to worry about it anymore. Then it was sort of like, sweet, let's hop in the boat, throw a case of beer in there and go have some fun.
Was that before the sport series? Well, it was only have like a Boston Whaler Sport.
Oh, 13, these are
130 or 13-0 or whatever.
I've still got a 1970 something.
Is it blue? Is it got that light blue
Well,
interior?
It used to. Now it's got... I repainted the whole thing. I think I went with more of a dark blue with white trim and red bottom. I can't even remember. I jazzed them up. The best one I had, though, was down at Bitter End. I painted it maize and blue for the Michigan colors, had BEYC Rescue down the side. And it was my personal boat, but we used it as a rescue boat as well. Felt like the king of North Sound, man. It was great.
So were you up around Ann Arbor?
No. Well, I worked for the University of Michigan. They have an alumni family camp, and that's where I really sort of learned how to sail and stuff. So
I should have put my Ohio State hat on. You got your Michigan
Buckeye.
hat. You got your Michigan.
I
got like 2 jerseys sitting in my hanging locker.
Well, we'll just agree to disagree on that one.
Hey, look, I am very happy that Michigan has a competitive team again to play Ohio State.
Yeah, I heard
last
they're
year
doing
you guys
all right.
won. You guys beat us. And it was like we won like I don't know what it is. Like I think you beat us twice in 15 years.
Yeah,
or something.
it's pretty rare.
No,
which makes it special.
No, but it makes it suck because it used to be when I was younger, when I was living in Columbus, Ohio. That game was like the Super Bowl of college sports.
Oh, yeah.
And it was always just neck and neck. You never know who's going to win. There were great games. It doesn't matter. I mean, maybe you walk away disappointed. There was definitely Michigan beat us a bunch of times back then.
Yeah, but then it just went to you guys for
you
long
lose the rivalry.
time.
It's like Cleveland Browns and Pittsburgh Steelers. We used to be rivals, and we've sucked for so long. We're not rivals anymore. Now the Ravens are rivals with the Steelers. Because we just suck too much, Eventually, they just lose it. So
hey,
So, anyways, what would you do? Like, what do you want to do? Another big single-handed thing? I know, it was certainly something you were pursuing quite a bit for a while there.
Yeah, well, I was trying to figure out what the hell to do. And I
got to refit the boat. That's like a big thing, It's not like
no, and that was the beauty of being up in Maine, because now all of a sudden I had a boatyard where I had use of the cranes and all that sort of stuff, and we could do whatever without a cost incurred. And so I was always able to go and take the mast off and inspect everything and rewire it, change this out, change that out, and do it. If it wasn't free, it was super cheap. And so I just kept doing that, and I kept trying to do these big trips. But, man, I just kept, running into bad stuff happening. This last one was the closest I've ever come to losing everything.
Yeah, Thank you, sir. I've been wanting to interview you on my podcast for a while. And it's tricky because we never,
I know.
It's you want to do it in person, which I get, and it's a lot
Way
better to do it
better.
Yeah, I agree. But
there's pizza.
Yeah, we got pizza and pizza and scotch. So great combination there.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, I mean, there's got to be a ton of stories in there, and also lessons to be learned. And you went through some pretty serious heavy weather by the sounds of the last one. Did you like roll up in a part of a hurricane or something?
Or
a tropical storm? Was it a named storm?
That was 2021.
Okay.
I went right through the eye of Tropical Storm Wanda.
Wanda. You
right
got your
through
ass
the
kicked
eye.
by a storm named Wanda.
Yeah, I know.
I got my ass kicked by a storm named Cristobal. Cristobal sounds like a French figure skater.
Where was that?
That was
I've heard you mention that before.
South of Nova Scotia, between like Nova Scotia and Maine. It was ripping up there.
Yeah.
So it was moving fast, which is good.
Sable Island territory.
Yeah, right around Sable Island, and I wasn't quite in the Grand Banks, thank God, but it blew, whatever, it blew pretty hard. I mean, some other single-hander abandoned ship not too far from me. My dad thought it was me that abandoned ship, and then he called the Coast Guard on me. And I was talking to Herb back then, Victor Alpha X-Ray 498 Southbound 2, which was a guy on the single sideband used to give like free weather forecasting. This guy Herb.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, he's legendary. He did it for years and years, and he like spanks people a lot. He was like this curmudgeon German expat living in Canada.
Yeah.
And some people love him, some people hated him because he would like try to call you out. Like, no, you're not there. There's no way you made it there, like, or whatever it is. So it's like, who's Herb going to get today? And it's like, it's a public sort of thing. There's all these other like people crossing oceans listening to the same single sideband thing. It's one at a time. Everybody gets a turn with Herb. And he's like, Matthew, you need to call your father. And I'm like, like I felt like such a little kid, like you're in school and it comes
getting
over the
reprimanded.
Yeah, well, it just was like embarrassing. I was so embarrassed. Herb told me I need to call my dad because he called a Coast Guard thinking I don't know, sunk or something.
Dude, that's sketch place, man. That's where the perfect storm and all that. That's where the Andrew Gale went down. But yeah, I don't know. I'll tell you one thing about the old Grand Banks. I went right over them when I was trying to head up to go through the Northwest Passage in 2020, and I really didn't have really detailed paper charts of the Grand Banks, but I sort of recall it being it was shallow, but it wasn't anything. I came really close to those. I think they call them the Virgins. Those rocks. I saw them. I could see an undetailed spot on this old chart plotter that I had on the boat. I was like, "Holy cow! Those are that's real shallow. Those are rocks I might be able to actually hit." I avoided those, but I remember in the middle of the night, God, it was so foggy. Doing a sail change as the winds were dying off, and one of those big oil platforms was trying to call me because I was headed right towards them. I was up sail change, so I didn't hear the radio, but I got back down and I heard that oil platform talking to a fishing boat, and they were both trying to figure out who I was. And the fishing boat captain, he's like, I don't know. On the AIS, it says like pleasure craft. That doesn't make any sense. And then I finally got in touch with them, and I had to give them 5 mile berth or something like that. I can't remember, but
right. But you were going to go around the Americas on that one?
Yeah, that was planned. It was basically try and go around the Americas, and then if that worked and the boat was still good, I was provisioned up to try and do the figure 8 nonstop.
Yeah, that would have been the shit.
That would have been really, really nice. But I only made it to just about 60 degrees north.
You got fucked by the pandemic.
Yeah.
I don't know what the ice. Did you continue paying attention to the ice conditions in the Northwest Passage? It might not.
No, it took me like another 80 days to get back. Because remember, that was by the time they turned me around, it was mid-August or maybe late August. So the hurricane season was in full swing, and there were already ones coming up the coast. And so I just booked it east to get over past the Azores. Saw a little bit of bad weather, and then started making my way south trying to figure out what I was going to do. Because you also, at that time, it was the height of the pandemic. I couldn't stop anywhere.
Yeah, it's such a weird situation.
Yeah, I was. That was the one trip where
Jesus,
I really got a glimpse into I think what it would have been like to be Donald Crowhurst a little bit, where you're just on this boat and you are stuck, and there aren't really any options.
Right, and it fucks your plans up. You had all these plans to do this big trip, and now you're just sailing around the Atlantic.
With a gigantic bag of fuel sitting on the cabin stall, like 200 gallons of diesel.
Yeah, I know that.
And I know you, yeah. I thought of you all the time. I'd be looking at it, and like there'd be little bits that it would be like it was leaking.
Yeah.
but never really leaking enough where I was like, that's got to be like a real leak. Maybe it's just the cap or something like that. But because I had no game plan. If that let go into the bilge, I would have had to have pumped it overboard. There's nothing I could have done.
Right.
It would have been impossible to live down there. I mean, it was. Well,
Motissier used to throw,
batteries, everything.
Yeah, he just throw cherry jugs over. I don't need this weight on my boat. You just throw cherry jugs full of fuel overboard.
Well,
it was a different time.
Different time, different. Hey, don't they still aren't there still areas where they dump garbage out in the ocean?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's all a how many miles offshore.
Yeah,
so there's a certain mileage. There's only two things you can't dump in the ocean technically. One is plastic, and the other is oil.
Yeah.
And of course, diesel and gas all fall in that category. But it's so many miles off you can do glass, and then so many miles off you can do metal, and of course you can do organics. Organics doesn't matter. I mean, some crab in the bottom of the ocean is going to eat your banana peel.
God,
so I mean that don't matter. But that would be fucking brutal for me, man, because like you try to get your mind in the right place for that kind of a big expedition, and then you get the boat ready.
When you spend all your money.
Yeah, you spend all your goddamn money to get all your side, and then you're there, you're ready, you leave, you're finally at sea.
Yeah.
And then some like one in every 100-year event. We get a pandemic once every 100 years roughly.
Yeah.
Right when you're out at sea, and then then you can't even stop. So you just drifting around. You sailed around and drank booze and ate your food. And
essentially, I was just like, well, I got to come up with a game plan. So I headed towards the Azores and was becalmed forever in the Azores High. And just sort of trying to figure out what to do. I went south. I was like, okay, well, maybe I'll go back around the world again. And then I don't know, there just didn't seem like a good point to that. And then I thought about maybe going around the opposite way, east to west. And I don't know, I think I was just aimless. By the time I got to the Cape Verdes, I was just like, I got to get off of this ocean or else I'm going to go crazy and jump off this boat. But at the same time, it was now September, and the hurricanes were just rolling. That was 2020. There were 29 named storms.
Oh, jeez.
And eventually,
did they go back to A? What do they do after Z?
I don't know what they did. Because one of the ones that I ran close to, I think, was like Hurricane Brett or something.
Yeah, they start back in the beginning.
I think they start back up.
Makes sense.
But yeah, I eventually went down to the equator, and then I was like, well, I'll head back towards the Caribbean and stay south of the hurricane line. Did that, and then I was so fed up by October that I was just like, screw it, I got to get back to the States, because I knew I wouldn't have to check in, I wouldn't have to do anything because they didn't stop anywhere, and so I just beelined it. And for whatever reason, for about 2 weeks, there was a huge lull in all the storms, and I got right through. So I was lucky, but I'll tell you, it was really interesting. The Doldrums always been like one of my favorite places. It's just such a weird, odd place. And the cloud formations and all the squalls and stuff. Right. Being in the Doldrums in mid-September, was unbelievable. Seeing the convection stuff and the tropical waves, and those clouds literally looked like atomic bombs, perfectly white. These towers, and it's just all moving up, and it all just spreads straight out in every direction. I've never seen anything like it to this day, and I've been through the Doldrums, I think, like 6-7 times. Mm-hmm. But I think it was just because it was that time of year. There was, the ultimate heat, that was the peak of hurricane seasons, September 14th, I think. And that was just about the time that I was at that area. And, man, I'll never forget. But there'd be like 6 or 7 of them all around, of just these perfect cylindrical towers zooming up, and you're just moving fast. And I don't know, I got in some vicious squalls for sure, but it was some of the most beautiful cloud formations I've ever seen in my life.
I've definitely seen some weird clouds in the Doldrums. In 2013, we're doing that big microplastics mapping out the eastern side of the North Atlantic garbage patch.
Yeah.
And I found that Swan 48, and it's a whole long
I've seen that video, man.
Yeah, I did have dude, I had no idea that was going to happen, that stupid ass video. I would have put the Ocean Research Project logo in that damn thing or something.
I know, right?
I was just toying around. I literally just clipped an old video, a section out, and just threw it on YouTube, and it fucking blew up.
You never know. You never know what's going to do that.
Damn it.
Yeah, right.
God damn it. Well. I would have spent a little more time. At least that's something in there. But anyways, after our engine broke, it took us 24 days to do 500 miles. because we had a broken engine and we're in the doldrums. We're on the western side of the Bermuda Azores high pressure system, that doldrum essentially.
Right.
So, and it's fucking getting into like August. And I'm thinking like, oh shit, like we can't run, we can't do anything, we didn't got wind, and we sit there for like 10 days drifting, and whatever's drifting around you stays with you. So like one day it's like a little bit off the bow, the next day like some thing is like off the stern, the next day it's over here. You literally just become floatsome. And fish.
And
start
sharks
to congregate.
start coming in. Yeah,
you ever have little fish congregate first? The little fish first and the bigger fish, and you become like a coral reef almost out in the open ocean. So at one point, a tropical depression developed right on top of our head, right where we were.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh shit, this might, maybe it turns into a storm, maybe it doesn't. But it created like 1,000 squalls. It was the weirdest shit ever. And so we had
doldrums, man.
We had no engine. And with squalls, it's like sails up, sails down. Because these are pretty nasty squalls. Got lightning in them and blowing like 40 knots, 50 knots, whatever. But they last 20 minutes.
Yeah.
It's not you drop your sails, it's not a big deal. But we spent like 2 days. I must have put my main up and down like 150 times. Dude. Because I'm trying to get to Bermuda at this point so I could fix my injector pump had went out because we got fuel from a freighter, and I mean it's a whole elongated story. But that shit was nuts. I don't know, man. The whole trip around the Americas, though, the one thing that really bothered me, I think, was the intertropical convergence zone in the Pacific, which is like the ultimate doldrum. I mean, there's high pressures. Like that Bermuda Azore high pressure, and there's high pressures north of Hawaii. There's some big doldrums out there, but the ones by the equator are kind of like the quintessential.
Oh my God, yeah.
And I was going like a knot for, I don't know, days and days. I thought there was a current against me. I don't know if there was or wasn't. I was in the middle of the ocean. How could, like literally in the middle of the Pacific, But I remember that. I mean, I never the nice thing about that trip and some of the trips you've done previous to the one we were just talking about is that you always were like making headway to the next waypoint. And if you're making headway to the next waypoint, you feel like you're accomplishing something. You're good in the head, because you're like, all right, I'm getting, I'm 300 miles, I'm 200 miles, 100 miles. All right, got to this waypoint. Now the next one, whatever that next waypoint. The next waypoint might be 500 to 5,000. Like who knows what it is,
Right.
But you feel like you're making
doing something.
You're doing something. You're getting there. You're getting progress. You're But when you're just aimlessly drifting around, and that was the Crowhurst situation,
Yeah.
that will fuck your head up.
Well, and having the fact of him knowing what he was doing out there, sort of cheating his way through it and all that stuff, the pressure of that, I think, is what really sort of cracked him. But yeah, I mean, you're right. If you're at that point, because I didn't have a game plan, and that's what sort of was messing with my brain. And that was the one trip where I ended up, because I had provisioned that one. I was like, well, shit, I might end up being out here for like a year or more. So I brought like a ton of alcohol, tons, like, I don't know, 15 gallons or something like that. And I dumped out. I brought like this 100 proof vodka or something. I had a 5-gallon jerry can of that. And I ended up dumping that out. Like, that was the only time I've ever dumped alcohol off the boat. But I was like, I don't need this. I don't need this in my life. And I just dumped it out. And,
oh, my God.
Well, I was just, my brain wasn't in the right state of mind.
No.
And,
it's a good decision, I'm sure.
It had to happen. But yeah, I don't know. It was one of those things. If you don't have like a set goal that you're aiming for, aimlessly wandering the ocean is not a really good thing. I think for your brain. I don't know how Reed, it's a guy's name, Reed Stowe.
Reed Stowe, yeah. So Reed Stowe spent 1,000 days, actually longer than 1,000 days.
Yeah,
his goal
like
was to spend
1,200 or something.
Yeah, he was going to spend 1,000 days alone in the ocean. And he was up in New York City before he left and met a young, beautiful girl who I don't know what in the hell he told her. I don't know what kind of game that dude got. But somehow he convinced this girl to go on this.
You got a boat, man.
Well, yeah, it's one thing to have a boat and be like, hey, girl, you want to go to the Bahamas? I'll get you a pina colada, as opposed to, hey, girl, you want to go spend 1,000 days in the open ocean?
Yeah,
But she did, and to her credit, and she ended up getting pregnant, and she left, I don't know, like, what, it was 200 days in or 100, whatever it was. And then he continued on and did the 1,000 days after. So it ended up being like 1,200 days at sea, 1,000 of them alone at sea. But he wasn't He wasn't doing any. I think he went around the world once in that, but he was drawing like giant hearts, and he did like GPS art. He's an artist.
He wanted to do a big turtle, I think, on one trip, and then he has. I mean, his thing, and I think he's still trying to do it, but it's essentially like an astronaut training sort of thing, where it's comparing life at sea to being what it would be like for an astronaut trying to get to like Mars.
Yeah. He's been, I would say, lightly. Collaborating with NASA on this idea of if you stick these astronauts in a small tube thing and launch them at Mars, and it takes 3 years to get there, how do you keep them from going crazy, essentially? Mm-hmm. But I mean, Reed caught a lot of shit at the time. Particularly, there's like a bunch of Sailing Anarchy. There's like this whole, and I'm not trying to give Sailing Anarchy a bad time or anything, but there was this group of people that just shit on him like hardcore.
Yeah.
One of them like stalked him. Like when that girl came off the boat and she flew back, he was waiting at the airport for her. Like on some crazy.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like it was like out of control and just like bashing the shit out of him. I think someone was hating probably because of the younger girl, older guy, or I don't know, jealous he's doing his dream. I don't know what it was exactly. And they're a bunch of racers who never fucking even go in the ocean, a lot of these guys,
Yeah.
So, but it was that part was kind of a shame of the situation. Reed is a from what I can understand about the guys, he's a very special guy. He would get up, he would talk about how he gets up in the morning and does yoga on his boat after like day 800, and he's like crying out of joy of being in the ocean. Like it's like, it's like who the fuck cries out of joy? Like I'll do it. Like I'll do it. Day 800, I'll sit out there, I'll look at it.
If you
I'm
had
gonna cry about
the
it.
spectrum of like Knox Johnson on one end and Morticia on the other, that'd be a good. You get the more whimsical soul searcher, and then you get the hard nosed, like I'm just trying to achieve this goal.
He's
sort
definitely
of thing.
Morticia through and through. There's
yeah.
But
That side of the spectrum.
He was an artist. I think he built his own 70-foot Faro cement boat, I believe it was.
Yeah.
And then all the work inside was like hand carved, not sculpture artwork. What the hell you call wood carvings when you? Wood carved the shit out. He wood carved the shit out of the inside.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah, everything. Instead of just having like cabinet doors, you've got these like
like he spent time like carving intricate patterns into everything. So
where is he from? Is he Canadian?
He's in the Carolinas now. No, he's from the States.
He's from
my
the
friend
States.
Herb McCormick knew the guy from back in the day. Herb was a writer of Cruising World for years and years. And they kind of, not that it came up together, but they knew each other. I got a couple of friends. Another friend, Mike Peacock, knew him well. And they're all, he's always been a bit different, to say the least, But
hey, we all are though.
No. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. And I've been in touch a little bit with his wife over the years, on and off. 'Cause I wanted to talk to him about that. I would love to go out and spend some years alone in the ocean. Like I would not be doing yoga and crying, but it would be.
No, I don't think
and
so.
I can't draw hearts or sea turtle or whatever he's. He was drawing like with his GPS. And he is an artist. He had this whole thing he did in New York with these giant like 10-foot by 10-foot paintings that kind of looked like Jackson Pollock to me, but I'm not a very good. I'm not saying he was copying Jackson Pollock, but it kind of looked of that nature.
Right.
It's a lot of paint splattered, but it was about that trip. So
okay, interesting.
So yeah, more power to the guy. Now he's got a young kid, of course, because he got this. He's got to be in his late 50s, mid 50s, and he's got probably
older than that, right?
60s.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. And he's got a kid, so it's a little hard.
He emailed me to congratulate me after my trip.
Oh, did he?
Yeah,
that's
which was
great.
super nice.
Yeah, that's great. No, man,
that's the only contact.
You're not going to find many people like that. That's for damn sure. And even within the community of few people who do that shit, he's out there on some, like you said, like some Morticia, like a totally different level.
Totally
growing
different.
sprouts in his bilge and doing yoga out there, staring at the sea. Like it's a totally different thing. But I think that with him, the goal always was just being out there, like embracing the ocean in this kind of almost like a spiritual.
It's what pulls me out there,
manner.
man. I love being out there. I mean, I like the challenge of doing the trip around the world. That for me I was very curious to see what that would be like if I was capable of doing it, and how it would change me as a person to be out there in that environment, and if I could deal with that sort of stuff. But I really love being out on the ocean. I love sailing. I love being in the middle of an ocean, as far from land as you can, because it's the only free place on this planet anymore. Right. Feels great to be out there. I mean, I definitely get a sense of like, this is my world when I'm out there, and nobody can tell me what to do at all. Like you can do whatever you want.
I mean, it definitely from the perspective, whatever, from.
There's no laws out there, man. It's great.
No, there is nothing. No, it's just you, and there's no rescue either, really. I mean, to some extent,
honestly, that begs a good question. So I've always taken it very seriously that because it's just me on the boat, and I'm putting myself in this predicament, so to speak. I mean, most people, the idea of being alone on a boat in the middle of an ocean is terrifying. Mm-hmm. If I get into trouble out there, and it's something I've put myself into, I think I'd have a pretty hard time of requesting help from anybody else.
Yeah, there's an old school single-hander mentality, supposedly at least.
Yeah,
I heard about back in the early days when we get involved in this shit, where if you put yourself in the situation, you gotta get yourself out of the situation. Essentially, you don't risk somebody else's life to save your own when you've knowingly put yourself in an overly risky situation to begin with. So it's I mean, it's easy to say. It's just like it's easy to say.
It's one of
I'm
those
going to
things.
Step up in my life raft. I'm not stepping down in my life raft. And then you're in a storm. And you're like, break out the life raft.
Yeah, swan dive. Well, and I, for people that are doing races and stuff, those are organized things. Obviously, it's totally different. But because I got to sit down with Elliott Smith. He was in the Golden Globe.
Okay.
He was, I think he was the only American entrant.
Was it the first one or the second one?
The second one.
Oh, okay.
And he made it. He had trouble with his bowsprit and then ended up having to abandon.
What kind of boat?
I can't remember, man.
I don't think rustlers have bowsprits, do they?
No, it wasn't a rustler.
I know was the first one. I didn't follow the second one at all, but I know that there was quite a few. I know that
there was some
woman won the second one.
Kirsten, yeah,
good for her. That's amazing.
Yeah, I know. It's pretty cool. Well, and there's a girl out right now. Cole Brewer or something. I can't remember her last name, but she's doing the solo ocean challenge or whatever it is. I don't know too much about this race. I gotta do a little more deep dive. But essentially, they're taking fast boats around the world.
Oh, to go fast.
But it's a lot of open 40s, open 50s, and I think It's definitely nonstop, but I think, if they have trouble, they can anchor off for 96 hours or something somewhere, which
is stopping.
It's stopping, yeah, obviously.
Yeah. But then again, Knox Johnson did drop an anchor at one point.
Well, because he was trying to catch himself off. He ran aground.
Again, it
wasn't intentional.
If you run aground, you are no longer a vessel underway. You
well,
are.
You know what though? I've heard.
I'm not trying to give him. I'm not trying to give him shit. I love Knox Johnson. You want to see something crazy? Here, go ahead.
No, well, I've heard you rant about this on your pod before, and it's always great because there's a question in my head about that because there's a lot of people that attempt to do it. Oh no way! Is this a personal letter?
No, that is from 1968, I believe, or 9. That is an original Knox Johnson right after he got back from the first ever single-handed circumnavigation of the world, talking about basically what am I going to do with my life and how I'm going to write this book. He hasn't wrote the book yet. He talks shit about the government a bit, and and that came from Nick Radka, who's I said, who's a fan of yours. He got a copy of what is it? A world of your own. What's the Knox Johnson book?
Yeah, A World of My Own.
Yeah, and that fell out of it.
No way.
Yeah. And I traded Nick something. I don't know. I begged Nick for it, and then I framed it.
That's crazy.
I gotta hang it up, but that's an original.
I'm gonna have to read that when we
original
finish this.
Knox Johnson.
Holy
but I mean,
smokes.
all I was trying to really get at some level is that when it comes to nonstop single-handed circumnavigation,
well, there has to be a delineation.
Unassisted,
yeah.
Right? So if it's unassisted, it's simple. You can't get anything. I can't give you a six-pack of beer, a pack of smokes, a gallon of diesel, a bunch of food. Can't give you shit. You're unassisted. Single-handed is easy. Nobody can come on your boat at any point in time, period.
Yeah.
You got to be alone the entire time. But so then why is it that the nonstop has this weird wiggle room where it's like, well, you can drop an anchor, but you can only do it for so long, or you can run aground or whatever, not to give him a hard time, obviously. But it's like, okay, so if I can drop an anchor once, what about 1,000 times or 100 times? Or where do you I mean, in the international rules of maritime navigation are very clear that once you have dropped an anchor, you are no longer a vessel underway. And if you're not underway, you have stopped. And if you were to take a Coast Guard 100-ton captain license test and they asked you if you dropped an anchor, are you underway? You said, I am.
I know, yeah.
You would fail. They would say, I
don't want to get your wires are touching. Getting hot.
Yeah. All right.
No, well,
that's all I got to say about it.
I do. I understand that. I mean, because there are, there was somebody who was tempting to go from Vancouver or something, and he ended up anchoring in the Falklands for a few days. Somebody came on his boat, and then he ended up, finishing the rest of the trip. And there were a lot of people that were like, "No, that still counts," and all that stuff.
No,
it's
don't.
Like,
it don't count.
Really
I'm sorry.
I mean, that's why
count.
I was very fortunate on my trip to the Falkland Island government let me get in there, not have to anchor, not have to tie off to the boat. The boat, they were on board for it. They pulled up real close and they threw boxes over. So the only thing I didn't succeed in was I needed to take assistance. I needed food.
Yeah. Well, I had the same problem when Watermaker broke.
Yeah,
that fucked me up. I was trying to do it unassisted myself, but my Watermaker broke early on. And my little manual Watermaker pumped over 400,000 times.
Yeah, I know.
And
right?
so I had to come out and throw a Watermaker at me, and that killed the unassisted thing.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to go in and drop an anchor. Like, I just floated around off Newfoundland until the fog cleared and somebody could get out there and throw this box at me with a.
And that was so early in the trip too.
Yeah, it was right. And I'm thinking like,
were you like, should I just go back and start again?
No, I thought I'd have to start again in Newfoundland. And then now my start and finish is going to have to go out to end it in Newfoundland. And I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it was just like, it was rough. But luckily, I had a friend who found a used manual Watermaker. The what the hell was it? The Survivor 30 or whatever.
Yeah.
And
that little catadine thing or whatever it is.
Yep.
Oh man.
Yeah, I pumped it over 406,000 times during the rest of that trip. That used one,
dude. I hated it like that. Mine broke in the Indian Ocean, and I was so far out there. There was just nothing I could really do, I guess. But yeah,
you just get rainwater.
Yeah. Well, that's what real men do, Matt.
Yeah, right.
I'm just kidding, man. That trip, when I think about even the fact that I was trying to attempt to do that with my little knowledge of the Arctic and stuff, my hat's off to you, because that's such a different impediment than an open ocean.
And you probably have water tanks like built in your boat.
I usually, what I run with, I have two 35-gallon plastic tanks, and then I have a water bladder, and then I have jerry cans.
See, Open Vega didn't have any water tanks. Zero. Nothing.
In the documentary, you just had the hose in your mouth.
I would stick the hose 7 pumps to a swallow. If you stick the hose in your mouth, you pump it 7 times a swallow. If you wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning and you're thirsty, you got to break out the Watermaker and pump it. Throw the thing over the side and start pumping.
I can imagine that, dude. I can remember on one of the trips, I ran out of water, and I just bought another one of those because I believe those things are good. I think I just got a bad one that year, and I remember being in the Doldrums, and I would be trying to fill up like a 5-gallon jar. I'd be like, all right, it's going to take 5 hours. I'm going to pump for 5 hours straight. But yeah, every like minute or two, because it's 95 degrees, I'd stick it under my hat and then give it like 10 pumps. And it all just drained down just to cool me off. Felt so fucking good. Oh, man.
Yeah, but
those
I think
water
the
pumps.
Arctic, you would have been, a West Sail, you had the fuel, you knew it, you had the preparation, which is the important thing, because the Northwest Passage is weird that way, where you can get, it depends on the year.
Yeah,
you can have lots of light wind, like no wind, essentially, up there. You can have no wind for a week or weeks or whatever it is, and then when it blows like a bitch, and then you have no wind again.
Yeah.
So, it was the right way to do it and to bring a shit ton of fuel. And then once you get through the passage, after that, whatever, you run out of fuel,
then
you run out of fuel. It doesn't matter anymore.
to me. Yeah.
Right.
I don't know. I was kicking myself because the year before Randall went through, and I was like, God, I really should have just gone that year. But I was I didn't.
Well, how do you feel now is the thing. Like, does it bother you that you weren't able to do it? Do you feel like I need to do it? Is it just like a thing you don't care about anymore?
Honestly, I feel kind of lucky. One, because you never know what would have happened had I actually gone up there.
Well, it's not an adventure if you know the ending.
Well, yeah, exactly. But here, true. The fact that I actually casted off the lines, I did all the preparation, and for like 2 weeks I was headed up to the Arctic. That to me, and it was completely outside of my control whether or not I could continue. I don't know. For some reason, I feel like at least I had the gumption to go for it.
Right.
So that counts for at least a little something.
I think you would have.
It would have been nice
you would have done it, or at least done it as much as humanly possible. Who knows, like you said, what the hell's going to happen.
Right.
But I do think you would have, you wouldn't have turned around if it wasn't for the pandemic. So if you could have kept going, I think you would have kept going.
Yeah, oh, definitely.
So,
there was one guy who did. He told the Canadians to he was like, slough off, man. This is an open waterway. And he went through, but I from what I understand, he's got like a lifetime ban in Canada.
Yeah, I did hear about that.
Yeah.
Which
is cool, man. Hey, respect.
Well, if you never want to go back, probably like I was in the Northwest Passage this year doing
I know,
research,
right?
So, like,
you
I
gotta maintain that relationship.
Can't be pissing off the Canadians.
Love the Canadians.
Great
people.
Or the
cheer,
Inuit
cheer to the Canadians.
Yes. It's
so
really
what is it? What is that maritime? I can't even remember who I was emailing back and forth with. Department of DOT or I don't know what it was up there.
I made some phone calls before I left, going around the Americas, and essentially it was like, well, if you don't step foot on land, you don't got to check in. So that was it. So I didn't. I had a phone number. I wrote down like in pencil. I wrote down some phone number for the guy I'm supposed to call.
Yeah.
If it. I wasn't gonna. I mean, the last thing I wanted to do was make landfall. Land was my enemy. It wasn't my friend.
Right.
And problem with that archipelago there in the Canadian Arctic is it does get kind of tight sometimes. And then you got land on both sides, and
it's
lee
right there.
shores and rocks and all
ice
sorts
movement. Well, you know what I was kind of surprised about when I got back. Eventually, I think it was 88 days, and I returned back to the States, and there were emails from the Greenland maritime something or other, and they were like, greetings, welcome to Greenland, and there was all information about how I couldn't enter their country and stuff. So they were obviously tracking me on my AIS.
Yeah, I bet it was Oceot radio.
I don't know, but they couldn't get to me. Somehow they found enough information about me to get my email address.
That's interesting.
And obviously at that point it was moot, but I don't know. I didn't get that close to their country. I was definitely not in their territorial
waters. They didn't
waters.
send anything to me, and I was maybe 8 miles off Greenland at one point going around the Americas. I was close enough to see the mountains at one point.
That was back in the day, though. That was 2011, 12,
2011.
Right?
So it was a while ago. And things have changed. I mean, I've been going to Greenland. This is my 6th year this year.
Mm-hmm.
And it definitely has changed, over the years. So but not crazy changed. I mean, it's Greenland. I mean, it's still the Wild West of the Arctic.
It's challenging enough that it's keeping,
but they're trying to keep a much better track. It used to be people didn't even check in. You show up to Greenland. It's still to this day checking in is very odd.
Yeah.
Like last year I checked in and they didn't stamp the passport. It was all immigration and it's all customs and no immigration. This year was all immigration and no customs. One of them refused to even show up. They just they didn't feel like it.
Like, you're fine.
Yeah. That's what the guy said. He was like, we're too busy. You're okay. I'm like, all right.
I've had that happen in the island. There was one time I remember checking in. I won't even say the country, but I got in there sort of later in the day, and by island standards, that was like 3:30 in the afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
And the dude looked at me and he's like, Jerome. Because I knew it. He was like, you didn't have to check in today. You could be fine. You could go walk around. And I was like, yeah, but I want to do it by the rules, man. You hate getting kicked out of a country. I've seen people that get kicked out. It's no fun.
So what's next, man? What is next? The
boat
needs some love, but
the boat needs. What I need is some new sails. But I did want to run something past you. I've had this idea for a long time because I think back to your original idea, your original scheme of, which I think is a really great one, utilizing small sailboats as not only a research vessel, but under your guidance as like you've got essentially you become a commodore of a bunch of different vessels that are going out and doing this research.
Mm-hmm.
And I always wanted to go back down to the South Atlantic for a reason. And I thought it'd be kind of cool to go and map out. I don't know, has the garbage patch down there, I've sailed through it, but has it been mapped out recently?
No, I would say that it hasn't been done recently. Essentially, the trawling activity, for the most part, has died down considerably because organizations mostly were trawling the North Pacific and North Atlantic garbage patches, and North Pacific by far. When you hear about the garbage patch, I mean, most of that is North Pacific.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why we were able to map out the eastern side of the North Atlantic in 2013. Nobody had gotten there yet.
Yeah.
There are models for South Atlantic, South Pacific. There's 2 different models. And one of the models shows a garbage patch, for instance, in the South Pacific. One shows almost nothing. South Atlantic is also fairly.
Well, it's there. I've been through it.
Yeah, I sailed through it too, and I bounced off of. I almost hit a refrigerator at one point. Not saying that that's
Really?
normal. I'm not saying that's a normal garbage patch thing, but I was hitting all sorts of. I was hitting things and random. It's not an island of garbage, obviously, but yeah, I came like a foot from hitting a floating fridge. But and I'd run over like you think weird. Like sometimes you run over something at night. And you hear it like bouncing down your hull and your keel, sort of. And you go run out the back of your boat, but it's pitch black. You're looking out there like, what the fuck?
I've had scratches that I find after the boat gets hauled out, like on the bottom paint, Oh
yeah.
And it's always in that like wave-like pattern.
The problem is there's mapping and there's mapping of a garbage patch region, and there's the traditional way to do it is trawls. Dragging a trawl behind you.
So you sail down there.
I do that. We just did this first ever Chesapeake Bay wide microplastic survey that I finished.
Tipped my hat on that one.
At 2:00 this morning at 2 a.m. I officially finished. I kind of finished it the other day, but we're back in Annapolis. I'm back.
I was gonna say because I listened to the podcast yesterday.
Yeah. Well, that was mostly finished, but I was in Cambridge.
Right.
I was dropping off scientists and shit.
Drinking tequila.
I was drinking tequila, sitting in a car. In a parking lot.
When that lady comes up, that's too funny, man.
Yeah, well, I told Nicole, don't be parking your car. Don't leave your car in the fucking.
At first, I was like, "Oh my god, he's getting arrested."
I told her to park it. She don't listen to me. Never listen to me. Well, whatever. I can't say I don't blame her, but
sorry, I'm taking you totally off track.
There is a garbage patch that hasn't been mapped yet. That we don't know anything about, essentially.
Yeah.
In the Indian Ocean, but. If you want to do South Atlantic, South Pacific, or Indian Ocean, and you really want to do it properly, you can't just sail through there and grab a few samples.
No, you got to like grid it, right?
Well, that's what's been done so far.
Forth.
So that what we know about the South Atlantic garbage patch and South Pacific is mostly just random, a boat that goes through there. It could have been five gyres. Five gyres used to do it quite a bit, like 10, 15 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
They're a plastics, microplastics nonprofit. But they've moved, like a lot of them have moved. A lot of them have moved away from the data collection side to the, outreach, first off, right, educating people about the issue, but also policy change, which is the ultimate goal for really any of it in some ways. If you can create new policies and legislation on a governmental level, then you might be able to change the way that we interact with some of these plastics, particularly one-time use plastics.
Yeah,
would be the easiest to start with at the very least, or the micro beads that I was bitching about in the last podcast.
Yeah.
Which
I didn't realize about the microfibers on fleece and stuff like that.
Yeah,
going through the laundry.
You wash a fleece and it can be up to 60,000 little pieces of plastic. Microfibers can come off every time you wash it, and they're so
crazy,
small
man.
They go right through the filtration. They go through everything. And
so
they
you
just
talk to the cotton lobby because they'd probably love to use that.
Hemp for victory.
Well, I'm down in North Carolina. I drive through all the cotton fields, and I'm like, American-made cotton out here, man. No micro freaking plastics coming off of that.
A fleece is so warm.
Yes, that's true, man.
It makes a great middle layer.
Those synthetics, they're pretty good. I will not lie.
But they're trashing everything.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah, I mean, what are they? Well, I mean, and you talk about the plastics all the time, and I don't want you to have to keep going into it. But I do know that your voice is heard pretty loud and clear, and I think it's really interesting because a lot of people like to just focus on this, that, and the other thing, but you always bring it back to, I think, the correct problem, which is the mindset of people being like, oh, we're going to utilize this material that lasts 1,000 years for something that I'm going to use it once for 2 seconds, like a straw or like a stir stick or something. And it is. That's the thing that needs to change, I think, more than any, is just people need to just stop.
But you get
using it.
You get in almost like changing the culture.
Well, and that's
and that's the hardest thing you can do. Like one of the hardest
things you break the habit,
right.
And then, but having that mindset, because I try as much as possible never to use single-use plastic, even ones that quote unquote can get recycled, like bottles of water. I used to hate that when I go around to a speaking engagement and they'd be like, "Here, you want a couple bottles of water?"
You want to hear a funny story, man? I one time did a TED Talk about the problem of plastic trash in the ocean at a giant NPR building.
Guarantee they set you up with bottled water.
No, it's worse. It was in Jacksonville, Florida, and it was this big TED thing down there. And, whatever. And I did this talk. I was the last one before the lunch break. And so I do the whole spiel, plastic trash. You got the time limit. TED Talk's very rigid and all the rest. Yeah. And they told me they wanted me to write down everything I was going to say before I said it, which, of course, I didn't. Jeez. And everybody that did, I felt so bad for. It was actually, I've done a couple of them, those TED Talks. And that one was.
I know, I've watched them.
Yeah, you don't do that. Like, you don't memorize your speech and then give a memorized speech, because you're just not.
It's always going to come off really poorly.
The audience is going to fuck you up, because when you're standing in front of an audience and the pressure is on and the camera's looking at you and all the rest, and now you got to remember all this, like, word for word, a 15-minute speech. It's without a prompt or anything. Anyways, that's not the point. The point is, we get off. I get off the stage. It's lunchtime.
Yeah,
and it's like 500 people in the audience, all with like plastic forks, plastic spoon, plastic plates, plastic cups, and these giant dumpster things that they rolled up to deal with all this. And I'm talking to the guy who runs the entire facility of the NPR. It's like 200, 300 employees. It's a big building, and the whole building doesn't recycle. There's zero recycling, and it's like, you just made like 150 pounds of plastic trash of 500 people worth of plastic everything for this shit.
It's going to landfill for 1,000 years.
He's like, it's too expensive to recycle here. And the reality, like Annapolis, Maryland, most restaurants don't recycle. Most marinas don't recycle. And it's not the fault necessarily of just the marinas or just the restaurants. The infrastructure, there's nothing
else you can do with it.
Go to Europe. And when I was sailing around, when I did a whole Europe, Africa, Caribbean trip single-handed, I used to have to jump the fucking fence of restaurants to find a garbage, like a dumpster, like where I could put garbage, because the public stuff is recycling. And it would be broken into like categories. You'd have like your glass thing, you'd have your cardboard thing, you have your plastic thing. They do it in Japan the same way, where it's like a triple dump thing. And
there's no like just straight garbage.
Yeah, and I was like, as an American, from America, I was like, where the hell do I put my garbage? And so I would find restaurants and jump the fence like a renegade Santa Claus with my giant satchel of presents, and then dump it in there and try to jump the fence again before somebody like yelled at me or something,
And now you're a bastion for change.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Well, it wasn't. I recycle my recyclings. But not everything gets recycled. Some shit does wind up in the trash.
My God, yeah, tons of it does.
But we don't recycle much, and not to go down that rabbit hole, but we don't. The amount of trash, plastic trash or whatever that one restaurant creates in one night. Let alone a city full of them. And that's just one very small genre within, the whole spectrum of whatever NPR buildings and so on and so on. So but recycling plastic is very difficult, because if you have a plastic water bottle, for instance, the cap and that little ring that breaks off the cap when you first open the cap is often made of a different type of plastic than the water bottle itself is made of.
Yeah.
So you can't recycle them the same. Do you expect some dude named like Joe or Bob or whatever recycling people's names are to like sit there and snip that little ring off of every bottle and separate every cap? That's not realistic.
No.
So
we're not set up for it. That's for sure. And it is. I don't know.
We used to ship it to China.
Yeah, we used to.
In Indonesia, and China's
back.
Like, fuck you. I don't want your goddamn plastic trash. Get that shit. Take that shit back.
Which I think, rather than try and regulate it and all that sort of stuff, obviously, I do think that it is. You change sort of the mindset. But yeah, like you said, going about that and trying to figure it out, I think is really the challenge.
Right.
And
the biggest thing I think is just, if people can be aware, it's not realistic to go cold turkey on one-time use plastics, because you're going to be somewhere at some point, and you're probably going to really be thirsty, and someone's going to hand you a bottle of water in a plastic bottle.
Yeah.
And drink the damn thing.
Yeah.
But if you're aware of it, then at least you're going to be doing it a lot less. And it's just, it's more of like just reducing your interaction with one-time use plastics, as opposed to, what I think for most people is unrealistic, the cold turkey situation. Because when I was younger and you were younger, going to a gas station, there was no bottled water. Like that wasn't a thing. It was like Coca-Cola and shit like that.
Yep.
But it just didn't exist.
And it was in glass and it was in aluminum, and that was it.
Yeah, and you want some water, you go to your tap and you drink water from the tap. That's water.
The good old days.
Yeah, I know. When I was a boy, back when humans were better humans. Now, no. It's yeah.
Well, so anyway, I mean, you know,
I can go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah,
for a long
and I don't, you know, I don't want you to have to do that. It's one of those things. But I was just, you know, I was just thinking, man, it'd be nice. I'd like to. This last trip was literally supposed to be the easy one. I didn't want to have any like Cape Horn. I didn't want to have any of the dangerous, quote unquote, dangerous.
I thought you were going into the Pacific.
No, that was in 2020.
What was the last one?
Or no, 2021 was the one I was going to try and double the horn and go down to.
Right to the island. You got a grandfather or something, right?
Great grandfather. He's in the phosphates trade.
Yeah,
he got dropped off. And you know what's funny about that is that he was the first or second mate on that ship, and so they fill up on some island somewhere, and then they find this other island. This is, you know, early 1800. 1820, 1830, I don't know. And essentially, they were like, you are going to stay on this island, and we're going to sail back to England, and then we'll come back and get you. Guard the island.
Guard the island from what? 18? What
other
year
ships,
is this?
Other companies.
18, what'd you say?
Like probably 1820s.
1820s.
Back when they were still
French,
discovering
maybe,
all this stuff.
Were they still fighting the Spanish back then? Well, who is this? This is Americans, right? Was he American or is he English?
I don't know what the ship was, who the ship was under. So
was he an American?
He was an American. Oh, yeah. Yeah, he ended up living out the rest of his days in Portsmouth, New Hampshire.
The War of 1812 wasn't that long before, so it could have been the English, it could have been the French, it could have been a lot of people. The Dutch were heavy out there.
In any event, he, you know, I think about it, and I used to think, oh, man, what a bad luck he had.
How long was he there?
He was there for 9 months.
Yeah.
Yeah, he and this other guy. And then another ship came.
What's
and
the islands? Is it like crabs?
We believe that it used to be called New Nantucket, but now it's called Howland Island.
I believe that was the traditional name.
By
the indigenous population. Yes.
But the one that they thought Amelia Earhart tried to aim for. Howland Island.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Right.
But here's this thing that I sort of realized after thinking about it for a while. I was like, man, you know what? What kind of real terrible person must he be? He must have just been awful to have on that ship for them to choose him and be like, dude, you know what? You need to get off this boat and stay on this island.
Or maybe could go the other way. Maybe he was the trustworthy one where like we know like if anybody runs up on this island, we know this motherfucker ain't gonna take that shit. Like he's gonna take him out. Like
they ended up essentially performing a mutiny by disobeying the orders, giving up
the hell with that shit.
And they went back, and that was in his obituary. As he was like, when we had to choose between, you know, going to jail for mutiny.
So he was Navy at this point, like American.
It would have
Navy?
been merchant Marines, okay. I'm sure, something like that. I don't know when that all came around, but. I don't know. It's just kind of an interesting story, and so I was like, oh, I want to go. Maybe, who knows? There is.
Maybe the hell volunteers that maybe he didn't like life at sea, and he's like, I get this goddamn boat.
He spent his whole life at sea. He was.
Maybe he was a pain in the ass.
He was actually in, and I don't know what, where he was on this ship, but they were over on the Isle of Wight, and they got put in a berth, and the tide went out too far. Or farther than the people that the marina put them in, and broke the back of the ship. And they spent 7 years in England in litigation to figure out who was responsible. If a dock master puts you in a slip and says there's enough water, and the water isn't enough, and is it the captain's fault or is it the marina's fault?
I mean, I would like to think that the dock master knows more about the water than the guy running the ship, who might never have been there before.
Yeah, but you know, whatever happens to the ship is
the captain's always responsible. Fault, right, He's always going to catch the
so
ship.
That was I think it was this huge long legal battle, and I don't even know who
I don't know, man. I would definitely, if I were to put blame, and granted I'm the captain, so I'm going
to blame the marina.
Well, it's the fucking marina. It's your goddamn marina. You work here.
You told me
you're
what
here
it was.
Every day.
Yeah,
Don't you know you're got to put a lead line down there, you old fuck. Like, figure out what it is.
I'm hoping to have my Uncle Bill. He knows the family lineage a lot better. He's still up there in Boston, and I'm hoping to have him on the show at some point, because he hopefully will be able to go. But it's hard. I mean, there's only these tiny little news clippings and things like that from all the stuff that happened. But essentially, what I want to do is double the horn, go out to that island, and then come back. And that was 2021. But that was when I went through
that hurricane, and you broke your
tropical storm.
Oh, then you broke your Is that the one you built?
Yeah, the little side rail, so it has wood rails.
You got any footage of that?
There's not a whole lot. There's some footage of the next day.
You know, it's like.
No. I mean, I've got footage of me hove to before it kicked in because it wasn't very big. I mean, it was a small, compact little
Were you hove
tropical
to when it
storm. Yeah. And I was just sitting there in the boat, and everything was fine. The problem was we were just essentially every time a steep enough wave came, when we went back down, the bow was just smacking the water. And so the bowsprit, the side rails that you'd walk up, those peeled up. So they separated from the wood of the bowsprit. But the real problem was that I opened up some cracks where the bowsprit is adhered to the deck.
Uh-huh.
And that was where water started getting in eventually. And I was like, okay, well, I'm still headed towards Cape Horn, and I know that the bow and my bowsprit are a little bit compromised. Is this still a good idea?
So since you have one of the few people who have been in heavy weather situations where you've both hove to and run before the storm, because in the Southern Ocean, you run before it, essentially. You got to heave to down there. You just got to run.
You run.
How do you feel about if you have, let's say, infinite sea room, essentially, where you're not going to hit a lee shore in that situation, and you have two options. Essentially, you can heave to, or you can run before the storm. How do you feel about one versus the other?
It all depends on what the waves are doing. That's how I
Was there current, or was it deep ocean water?
That one was deep ocean water. There was really no current to speak of. The waves were acting like normal waves.
I asked this because I got this little silly Patreon podcast I do with it's kind of associated with my podcast, you know, and every once a month. And literally like yesterday or the day before, right after I got done doing the podcast on single hand, I did the next one.
Yeah.
And I was talking about heaving to versus running before the storm,
right?
And basing it around, I ever read Adlar Cole's Heavy Weather Sailing?
Oh yeah.
So volume 3, the last chapter is the Fastnet race in 1979, and so it was basically like a half hour of me just talking about heaving to versus running before the storm, using that as the reference point of how boats did versus one versus the other.
Yeah. And
in that particular case, the boats that ran before it did far better than the ones that heaved to in it. And I kind of wonder where is a breaking point essentially for damage, damage to vessel, one tactic versus the other.
Yeah.
Of course, you can add drogues to running down, and you can change this up. You can also heave to under a parachute sea anchor if you're Lynn and Larry Pardee.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's a lot of variables we can add to the mix. But if you were in the same situation again, would you heave to, or would you try running, or would you have done the same thing, or
well, under those circumstances, had I had if I knew what was going to happen to the bowsprit, I mean, I'm glad it happened because obviously the bowsprit was already a weak spot, because it should have been able to take that.
Right.
But I hadn't taken off and rebuilt that thing after
they make
the
a
trip
stainless
around the
one,
world.
right? That you can buy.
Yeah.
Isn't there like somebody making stainless West Sail 32 bowsprits or something?
Ugliest damn things you ever saw, man. That's wood. That's Doug fir, baby.
I know. They are pretty. A wooden bowsprit
they're really
is pretty.
Yeah.
All right.
But no, so I essentially that storm was moving to the south, and it was coming straight over the top of me, right down the middle. I went right through the eye in the middle of the night. Boom, the wind quit. I saw the stars about 15, 20 minutes, and then the wind shifted 180 degrees.
That must have created chaos.
Oh, yeah. And it was the second half of it that plowed me through it. But then eventually, once it became light and things sort of straightened up a little bit, then I just ran with it. I prefer to run with it. But again, it always depends on what the sea state's doing. In the last trip, when I got turned upside down, it didn't matter what. If you were going to hove to.
And this is the easy one.
Yeah. I was just going to do a figure 8 around the Atlantic, the North and South Atlantic. Like I called it the Atlantic 8. It was going to be just trade wind sailing, except for the very start.
I didn't even know you got capsized.
It turned upside down.
How the fuck do you capsize a West Sail 32?
Big wave. You get caught in a gale in the Gulf Stream.
What kind of oceanic tsunami?
I was just past the Gulf Stream, the main portion of it, but I was in a pretty big eddy, And essentially, it was supposed to be like a near gale that obviously accelerated over the Gulf Stream, and
out of the north.
But it was just one wave. No, it was south side of the Gulf Stream, and there's good footage of it.
You weren't in the Gulf Stream at that point.
Not in the main portion, but I was in an eddy that was probably blowing or moving at like 2.5 knots.
And what was the wind? Was the wind direction opposing it, or was
yeah.
Well, then
But all it was so one wave.
Show boat just sunk a week ago from that shit.
Oh really?
Yeah. They went in the Gulf Stream in a nor'easter, thinking, "Oh, it's blowing north. I'm going south. It's gonna blow me south." And it went right in the Gulf Stream off Hatteras, and it was a giant 60-foot catamaran, and it sunk, and they had to get saved in a life raft.
It's not. I do well, and honestly, I've always known that it's not a place to ever mess around. The only difference between all the other trips, because I know any other trip I would have hove to well before the Gulf Stream, knowing that forecast. But this was the first trip where I could see the Gulf Stream because I was downloading using Luck Grib.
Okay.
And Iridium Go. It was the first time I ever had that. And so
nice to have that shit.
Yeah. But the only problem is I made the stupid decision of thinking like, oh, I can weave through these eddies.
Oh yeah. Okay.
And I was really dumb because this one wave came out of nowhere. Obviously it was a remarkable wave, and it essentially broke underneath the boat. We tipped over and rode the falls and hit upside down. And that ripped all the gallows, ripped all the lifelines, ripped all the solar panels, the Dodger. Mongo, the wind vane was there, and the mast was still there. I only had a triple reef mainsail.
What kind of a wind vane is it?
Aries.
Oh, old school. Keep with the Aries.
Baby.
I heard that the daughter or granddaughter, whatever it is,
they're cranking. It's a new one. No, they started making new ones in 2016. They make new ones.
Are they aluminum or stainless?
Aluminum, baby.
Yeah.
Super thick.
Like my problem with the aluminum ones is that white. Like if they sit too long, you get that like white powdery stuff that freezes them up.
Well, you can
blast it off. You can clean it up if you.
You can clean it up. I use anywhere. There's only a few little sections that have any sort of stainless on them. You just use a lot of Tef gel and you're good.
System? The clicky system on one point seems like great because as you turn the air vane up on the top, it like clicks into place. So it's like. Where the monitor,
like
the damn thing is like a stupid little plastic wheel.
See, I've never used a monitor. I've only used the Aries and a Hydrovane.
But the little plastic wheel, you can easily, you can just take it by hand and go whoop. With the Aries, you're like click, 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 click.
Well, you can do that with the Aries. You just have to open one of them up and do it. But here's the thing that happens with the Aries, though. In really heavy wind, 40, 50 knots, sometimes if you try and just click it once or twice, it'll be like, and it'll do like a 90-degree turn on you, and then you're up there trying to click the other way. Oh my god, that was always pretty crazy.
Well, the Aries was a classic.
Mongo, man, he's the best. Like I've only lost one wind blade in the whole time. It was just one wave that came out a weird angle and just hit it flat. But I mean, that wind vane survived everything. I think I've sailed like 70,000 miles with it or something.
Yeah,
and I barely had to do any maintenance on it.
Yeah, no, Aries they're robust.
They're really good.
Yeah, and they're. I lost a monitor air vane once. They make two different sizes. And one has like red tape, one is blue tape, one is bigger, one is smaller. They're made out of like that plasticky sort of material.
And they're the same sort of design as an Aries, aren't they?
Well, they're servo pendulum.
It's
all servo, except it's all stainless. It's all stainless servo pendulum.
Right,
except
but a lot
the gears are bronze.
Some of it's like thin though, right?
Well, if you're going to have a problem with a monitor, which they did have on the first GGR, and in the second GGR, there wasn't a single monitor wind vane in the entire race. They all use
hydrovanes, right?
Yeah, and hydrovanes have their up and down too. I mean, there's issues. I've sailed about 20,000 miles with a hydrovane, about 50,000 with a monitor, and I don't know, maybe about 5,000 with the Aries. The Aries is much less because you just don't see them very often. But and those all deliveries.
Yeah.
But they all have their ups and downs. But the breakaway tube on the bottom of a monitor wind vane, right above the rudder, so to speak. It doesn't act like a rudder, but you know what I'm saying.
Right.
The wall thickness, because it's meant to break away. Well, they were breaking away in the first GGR, and Randall Reeves had one breakaway on his first attempt.
Yeah.
So they started
because his drogue went.
Well, that was
got wrapped around it.
Yeah, that was. I'm pretty sure he had one breakaway before that, and he had a backup. I had a backup also going around the Americas. They gave me one, a Hans back then, the original Scanmar guy gave me a backup breakaway tube.
Yeah.
And so they do make a thicker. I mean, it sounds good as a safety scenario because as opposed to ripping the entire wind vane off the back of your boat.
Yeah, right.
But the problem is that that's not going to really happen, and the tube ends up breaking maybe when it shouldn't. So they've worked on, I don't know, now they have a thicker breakaway. But there was enough of a thing that happened in the first GGR that in the second one, nobody got a monitor. There wasn't a single monitor wind vane in the entire.
Well, wasn't Hydrovane a sponsor for that?
Oh, were they? I don't know.
I'm pretty sure they were.
I know the guys who run Hydrovane, the son who runs it now. He's been running it for a few years. You know,
they're pretty cool.
No, he's great. I mean, well, they're good people first. They're both good people. Mike, who owns Scanmar, Mike Scheck, who owns Scanmar and sells monitor wind vane. He's a great guy. The Hydrovane people are great. I mean, they're all great. They're competitors. They got their thing, but they're different animals. One is servo pendulum. One is auxiliary rudder. They're totally different animals.
Well, and that's where it comes down to what type of boat. I mean, I would prefer a servo pendulum on something like a West Sail because you got a barn door for a rudder.
Right.
That, the Hydrovane, although I've been on a West Sail with Hydrovane, and the Hydrovane will still steer it for sure. I've never been in heavy weather with it, but I know that when I'm racing down big waves and the boat, my West Sail's surfing at 15 knots, I like the fact that my rudder is actually doing the work.
I've sailed
that feels pretty good to me.
39-foot. 35,000-pound double ender, heavy double ender. That's quite heavy, 35,000 pounds. And in heavy weather, heading to Bermuda, not crazy, but maybe blowing 40 or something like that with a Hydrovane. And the only difference is you have to give it a little extra. You use the ship's rudder to counteract weather helm.
Right.
That's the only difference. The long and short, I guess, is that a servo pendulum wind vane uses the rudder that came with the ship. It was a rudder that was designed to steer the ship.
Yeah.
But you also have lines in your cockpit. You don't have necessarily an auxiliary rudder if your rudder just falls off one day.
Well,
no. But if you have the Hydrovane, you don't have lines in your cockpit, and you do have an auxiliary rudder if your rudder falls off one day. But you have an appendage hanging off the back of your boat that is steering your boat. It is not being steered by the rudder that was designed by the architect to steer the boat. It is a appendage hanging off the back of your boat, which was not originally designed to have a rudder in that position.
Right.
So it doesn't work as well in some senses, but it works perfectly fine at the same time. You just got to give it a little bit of wheel. You give it a little bit of ship's rudder to counteract. And if the wind dies down, then you just ease up the wheel. You just turn the wheel back a little bit, Well,
and I end up sort of doing that with the wind vane in a way where you get it like dead straight in the middle, everything's all good, and then you get some weather helmets so you can just adjust the control lines a little bit, all that stuff. But I don't know, I love having the wind vane. Obviously on a boat this big.
Yeah, I can't.
You don't have.
One.
Yeah,
I got a garage door back there.
Full on hydraulic. Do you have like full on like fishing boat sort of size?
I have a fishing boat autopilot. There is a button on my autopilot to turn while dragging a net, so you don't screw up your net.
Nice.
Yeah, I literally have I have like a large fishing boat autopilot. It's called ComNav.
Yeah.
But I also have to have a DGPS or GNSS instead of a Fluxgate compass because I sail so far north that I get too close to the magnetic North Pole. And compasses don't work. So this year in the Northwest Passage, I think it was like 263 in every direction or something. And your compasses just stop working. So your autopilot stops working. So you have to have a satellite compass that gets its positioning through, triangulation of various satellites, which is expensive as shit. It's like a $3,000 stupid thing.
Couldn't you just rely on your GPS?
Well, it is like in a NEMA sort of way, right? Like you could get like a Raymarine Raystar 125 antenna and use like the NEMA, either NEMA 2000 or something like that, or the old, what is it, 0183 or whatever it is, and somehow tap that bitch into that shit. And no, it doesn't work. Sounds great, but no, it doesn't work. It's and you gotta have it. It's up there on the side of the pipe. It's long. It looks, it's this long paddly looking thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I have a hydraulic. It's my rudder is the size of a queen size bed. Well, at least it's bigger than a twin bed.
Yeah.
Like you and I could sleep on the rudder, and I wouldn't be comfortable with it. We might have to drink a bit, but you hear me snoring. I'm sorry. I would be snoring, but we'd have room. Is what I'm saying. I'm saying two dudes could sleep on my rudder, and they wouldn't be right up on top of each other's shit. It's a giant rudder. My rudder's massive. So yeah, I've got all hydraulics. And if you're going to go autopilot, hydraulic, you can do hydraulic autopilot on smaller boats too.
Yeah,
you don't have to do the linear drive unit, and you're better off with the hydraulics if you can go that route.
Well, that stuff stands up to longevity is a really big thing. I mean, compared to some of obviously the rinky-dink little ones you would strap straight onto your helm.
Yeah, those are a joke.
Those are absolutely. I've never actually been on a boat that we've utilized one of those and it has not broken to pieces like immediately.
Yeah, I made it about halfway to the Caribbean one time with one of those on a 37 Pearson. I delivered a 37 Pearson with a self-tacking jib. It was an odd animal.
Lovely. Yeah. Kind of like an island packet.
No, but it didn't have a cutter. It was like the only jib was self-tacking.
Oh, wow.
But it had like a
custom mod, probably.
Maybe. It was actually really well done, and I'm not a big fan of that style at all. But it had like a rail, like a heavy stainless rail that was lifted above the deck, and it was like flared out. Like it had reverse camber, I don't know what you call it, but it was bent out. And it had this car that rode perfectly on it. And because it wasn't a straight, like a track. Normally you see these things on like they're like a straight, like a traveler track. Essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah, this was a stainless tube that was bent out, flared on both sides. And it had this car that rode up and down it. And it did a great job, but it had that stupid, wheel pilot thing on it.
Yeah.
And it was, and it made it about halfway to the Caribbean and it shit the bed.
Yeah.
And
there's no taking those things apart. Like they have all those bearings in them and stuff. I remember watching a captain do that in my early days. And this guy, it was one of those where I was like, I don't think we should take that apart. And he popped it open with a screwdriver and just bearings just shot all over the place.
Well, the motor on it's tiny. If you look at
it.
So
like
basically, I would definitely suggest buying one of those wheel pilots if you have a wind vane. Because if you have a wind vane, you're not going to work when you're motoring.
Yeah.
So that works great motoring. That thing will motor you to the end of the earth.
I have one of those little Tiller Pro things.
Oh, yeah. Sure.
But obviously on Sparrow, that tiller's so heavy. Like if there's even a little bit of swell and it's dead calm, I can't use it. It'll rip that thing right in half.
I had one on the Vega. It broke pretty quick. I didn't try using it. I was down by the intertropical convergence zone in the Pacific.
Mm-hmm.
You ever just lose your shit sometimes? I lost my shit on that thing. I picked it up by the end and I just
I lost
the shit out of it.
Well, on that water maker, because I tried to fix it like 3 or 4 times to the tune of like hooking up turnbuckles to it to try and keep the pressure from blowing it apart. That third time after it blew back apart, I lost it. Yeah, I lost it big time. It's still there. It's still in the Indian Ocean.
Yeah, well, fragments of my Tiller pilot, I'm sure, are still somewhere in the Pacific.
I got some solar panels 400 miles northeast of Bermuda. They're new.
I don't know.
Well,
so you went out there to do this easy trip. You got flipped upside down.
Yeah, day 7.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, so but here was the thing, and this is, I guess, going back to our original thing about being hove to or riding out the storm. Because I put all these videos out on YouTube about it and got 80 million armchair explorers telling me what I was doing wrong and all this and that.
Right.
Obviously, none of them.
That's why you can't read the comments.
I don't read any of that. But it wasn't until that was just one oddball wave, right? And that hit at the perfect time, perfect way, blah blah blah. But the next day, when I got into the thick of the real eddy that I was in, I started seeing 20-footers with another 10 feet of breaking, boiling wave racing down the front. So I'm looking at breaking portions of these waves that are bigger than my boat, thundering down the front of these steep waves. And I was like, if I get hit by one of those, there's nothing I can do. I'm getting rolled multiple times. I'm going to lose the mast, probably sink. And all I knew is that I needed to get out of that area. And the only thing I could do is just keep running with the wind because that was going to be the fastest escape.
Right.
So that was where the situation, and I think to answer your question, the situation always is going to dictate whether you hove to or run with the storm. Hove to or run with the storm. If I would have got hit by any of those waves, it would have been a disaster.
Right.
So it wouldn't have mattered. And I know there's people that I'm sure would be like, well, if you're hove to, you have better chances or whatever. But then I would have been in that eddy around those waves for a lot longer.
I agree 100%. You got to get the hell out of the current.
Yeah.
I know. I completely agree. I think the hove to versus running is like in a, sort of in the petri dish thing, right? Like if you had identical space in the ocean with identical depth and zero current and and identical wind speed, and it's blowing 60 in this, it's blowing 60 in this same exact spot, and I can heave to this time and I can do this at that time, run this time. What's going to be the better option under those circumstances? When you're in a wind opposing a current, it's one of the most hazardous situations you can be in.
It's a total game change. Watching those swell come up and then all of a sudden the face just drops. And it just decides to either break or not break, and you're just clueless as to which one it's going to be. Like that was, it was going on like that for about 3 hours, and I was like, if I make it out of this day, I'm going to be really lucky. So I just sat and I just watched it because there was literally nothing I could do. I was just totally. It was like a throw of the dice, and but I don't know if when you read "Sailing a Serious Ocean" by John Kretschmer. You know him?
I know John. I haven't read his book, but I know that John is a legend. John's great.
He talks about a lot of it, and his preference is to, rather than hove to, he'll run before a gale until it gets too out of control, and then he likes to forereach. He's like hove to. He's before. Like and that's what I kind of do. Typically, a little bit in between. I hove to, but I'm moving it about a knot. In about 60 degrees to 70 degrees off the wind.
I forereached with a drogue once.
Oh, really?
How's that for an odd one?
I do. And how fast would you end up going then?
Pretty damn slow.
Like half a knot or something? Because hove to the big premise of that.
I get experimental every once in a while. What can I say?
I tried to, because I have a hard time getting Sparrow to completely stall when I'm hove to. She's always just moving a little.
Yeah, they're going to move.
And I wanted to see if I could get that slick that they talk about.
Yeah, the Lynn and Larry party slick.
Yeah, and right. I remember towing. I had some buckets on the boat, and I tied those off, and I tried to tow those, but they'd never stay the right side to really slow me down because I don't have a parachute anchor or drove or anything like that, and because there's so many whisker stays and bob stays on a West Sail.
You can run a parachute sea anchor if you do it straight off the bow, not the Lynn and Larry version.
Yeah.
I don't do the Lynn and Larry. I put it straight off the bow. It's uncomfortable as shit. It's
like
I can't
even
on
tie off to
anchor.
A mooring without chafing going on. It's awful. Like
you got to use chain on the boat side.
Yeah, the West Sail's like, it's one of those things.
You got a long full keel.
Yeah.
And a heavy double ender. Like that boat, because that boat can scream down exactly. Waves. It's made for that shit.
So I guess the end all be all answer, which I think is the only real wise one, because when I see people's videos and things like that where they're like, "This is what you need to do," and I'm like, if this doesn't come with a disclaimer that says every sea condition is different and you gotta know your own boat, well then I know that people don't know what they're talking about, but. It's always going to depend on what the seas are doing and what type of boat it is and all that sort of stuff. So there's no answer to that question. I don't think.
That's good. Well, you're right.
You can always share your own experience.
Well, there's also some boats that don't heave to for shit.
Yeah, exactly.
The
a lot of the modern
draft,
boats
flat
and
bottom
stuff.
production boats, they're not going to heave to for shit.
Right. What does this boat do?
Well, I've got a pretty modern. Bruce Roberts redesigned this in '99. That guy who originally had the boat half built or whatever. Mm-hmm. Paid Bruce Roberts. It takes most Bruce Roberts 65 is a New York 65. Probably like 95% of them. They make a narrow and a wide hull, but they're still the same basic thing.
Yeah.
He also made something called a Voyager 655, which very few are made. And this was so.
I think I've heard of that.
He took the Voyager 655 and redesigned it. This is a Voyager 650. This is the only one ever built because he redesigned it for that guy. But it's and that's why it's a big honker. And I mean, even for 65, 72 overall, it's 65 on deck, and it's 100,000 pounds empty. We're probably sitting at 110,000 right now. With a beer I have in my fridge.
And they just gave you this.
Well, the guy
they gave the research.
Technically, the
ocean research.
Yeah, I don't own the boat. The nonprofit owns the boat, but
smart.
Well, I mean, I'm not. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I would love to own the boat, honestly, but I mean, it's not the point, right? I mean, you're running a nonprofit.
Yeah,
it's not about you, and it's not about money. It's all about the mission, essentially.
Right.
But the guy had it built. I mean, it's a story. Bruce Roberts redesigned his Voyager 655. The guy's name was Zan with a Z. Anybody's born in America. Now, Zan is John in Dutch.
Oh.
All right. Now, he must have had pretty strong ties. Maybe his parents, I don't know anything about it, but maybe his parents were like, immigrated from Holland or something into America. It's just a guess. Why is his name Zan?
Yeah.
But the point is that who makes the best metal boats on planet Earth? Steel, not aluminum. Because aluminum, you could argue the French with aluminum pretty well. The French like Boreals. There's a Boreal right over there in a mooring field right now. It's sitting there at $2 million at 51 feet or something. Kind of looks like shit, I ain't going to lie. Because it gets streaks down the hull. It doesn't look like much. But
the aluminum boat does?
Yeah, well, the aluminum boat's without a paint job.
Over
time, it gets. You go look at that Boreal, and it's only about a 4. I know I sold that guy. He doesn't know that I know him, but I know him because I sold his last boat. He had a 34-foot aluminum boat, and I sold it to some guys from Argentina. He just doesn't know that. And then he bought this Boreal. He was one of the editors of Sail magazine. He married a very wealthy woman, and that's why he has a very fancy boat. But
that's not Peter, is it?
I don't know. But I'm somehow in the mix. But anyways, so the Dutch make incredible steel boats. The Dutch still have these big factories that can roll steel. Normally in the United States we have hard chine boats, and
it's all panels, right?
Yeah, it's all panels. You can't you can't make a steel boat look like a fiberglass boat under the water line with a perfectly rounded hull very easily. So in the Netherlands, they have these big factories that can still do that. So all the plans went to the Netherlands, and they took the plans and made it like reality, essentially. How are we going to have all the structural, whatever infrastructure, stringers and bulkheads and everything else? They put that into the design, and then they shipped it back to a guy in the southern Chesapeake Bay named Howdy motherfucking Bailey.
Yeah,
and. Who's like 95 years old.
This is Sailing into Oblivion podcast. We try not to swear on this one.
Yeah, good. Good fucking luck, man. Anyways.
Sorry, Bailey.
Sorry, audience.
No, it's okay.
Sorry, people. So,
gosh darn
see,
it.
that was a throwback from an old podcast.
Yeah, I know. I remember. Like I said, I'm a fan.
So anyways, Howdy Bailey was in Norfolk. Norfolk is the home of the Atlantic Fleet, which means that's where the head of the Navy is. And that's where they build a lot of Navy boats. So when people who are building aircraft carriers, destroyers, and submarines wanted overtime, they would go to Howdy Bailey and they would build steel sailboats. Larger steel sailboats. So then this kit came over from the Netherlands, and it was welded together by the same guy who welds, the same people who weld our Navy, essentially. Wow. And then the guy was going to finish the boat himself, and he never did. And so it sat abandoned for 18 years in the C&D Canal with the same zincs or no zincs. So it had tons of electrolysis. I spent like a year just welding pock marks, and luckily, there's a couple of welders that came and helped during that process that are way better. 3 of them, actually, that are way better. 2 of them from Alaska. I had a surprising amount of people from Alaska come and help me work on this boat, which is kind of random being in Maryland. But anyways, we spent 3 years in a boatyard, 2 years in a boatyard, 3 years total, because I had a fundraise also to get the money to do it. And then we built this thing. So, yeah, she's a total one-off. And then all the interior is made of solid cherry. There's no veneer in this boat. Everything is solid wood, and
I think I remember that from watching some of the videos of you working on it and stuff.
Yeah,
it's beautiful. I mean, you go down below in this thing, and it really is. It's nice, and it's actually in a lot of ways it's kind of reminiscent of Sparrow, where it has the white paneling. It's not one of those most West sails. It's just wall to wall teak or mahogany, so it's super dark.
You don't want that,
and it's like a cave.
My windows are not. I mean, I've got windows on the boat in various places for let light in.
Yeah,
but this boat was originally built for the Arctic. So the guy wanted to sail this boat to the Arctic. It was made for the Arctic. And so you got to think, there's 6 inches of insulation, 4 inches of blown insulation, 2 inches of board insulation.
Wow.
So you can see where those hatches are right there. You see how much more.
Oh, yeah.
Well, there's like another 6 inches going up. That's all insulation above your. I'd have like 7-foot headroom in here if you would actually strip it all the way to the hull.
Well, it's just
the funny thing is, I told this guy, he was getting in his late 70s at the time, and he was starting to have real health issues, and he had been sitting on this project for 18 years. He didn't abandon it, but it sat, pretty flipping abandoned for a long time.
Neglected.
And super. and nothing, I ain't trying to give the dude a hard time, but so, he donates his boat to the nonprofit. I'm like, look, I sail in the Arctic. We go up, we do research, we do climate research, map uncharted fjords and study glaciers. And I'm like, man, when I get this boat finished, because, that's what he wanted, somebody that's going to appreciate it. He's going to sail it off to the Arctic and saw the potential of the boat. And of course, I got on board, even though it had no interior. It had a hull, it had masts, had a bunch of old systems. I had to pull the masts out and redo everything on them, but still I could see like massive potential.
Yeah.
And he saw that I saw that, and that's why he donated it. It took like 9 months to get him to donate it, because there's one thing to talk about, it's another thing to sign the paperwork.
Yeah.
But anyways, so all that happens, and we're finally there. He signs the paperwork. And I'm like, I'm going to build this boat out, man. I'm going to make this a beautiful boat. I'm going to sail it to the Arctic. I would love for you to come join me, come join me in the Arctic. He's like, nah, man, it's too cold. I'm like, it's too cold? What the fuck do you mean it's too cold? You built this for the Arctic, dude. So he never joined me. Unfortunately, he had a stroke not long after, and he doesn't remember who has the boat. Like he lost his mental facility. I never was able to show him a finished boat.
Really?
I know. Well, if I showed it to him, I don't know if he would. Maybe it would snap him out of it. But he's in a home. He's in a home in Delaware. I could go break him out of it. Like, how do I get him out of it?
Yeah, right.
But yeah, and he's in his 80s and he's in poor shape. But anyways, yeah, it's I was very fortunate. This boat is a great boat for doing the research that we're doing and having all the science equipment, the scientists, the sailors, 5-month expeditions and so on. It's
well, and it's all for I truly think a really worthy cause. I mean, I go out and I do these trips because I want to go do them, and I like doing this stuff, and I get to share the stories, and I hopefully inspire people. I know you and I have talked both about that, but I mean, you really set the bar really high where it comes to, essentially trying to make a little bit of a difference, actually putting yourself out there, not just for your own accomplishments, but for, a betterment of everything. I mean, you're doing scientific research that I think really helps, and it's not every day that people selflessly do that, and it's not like it's some big money making thing for you by any means.
You don't make any money, but
it's just it really is. It's pretty impressive to see, and I definitely when I see or listen to a podcast or I see some of the videos from last year's stuff and all that, I mean, I'm always just like, geez, Jerome, you got to get your shit together.
Well, it's
you got to do something more than just go on your own little trip.
It's nice to have your own trips, and I want to do another big single-handed trip myself for my own reasons. And and I'd love to do that. But and it's great to do traditional cruising, and the whole, like when I sailed alone from Annapolis to Europe, Africa, Caribbean, and back over 2 years, that was kind of somewhat of a normal cruising scenario. It wasn't normal to do it single-handed and blah blah blah, but it's normal in a sense where you show up in a port. You hang out. If you like the place, you stay a little longer. If not, you go to the next port, the next country, the next continent, and you just keep going along in that sort of, no real plan, cruisy sort of mentality, and that's great. And that's lovely. And I think a lot of people who are out there sailing, at least that I've bumped into, and I hope this is changing with more younger people getting involved, but generally it's people who are older and are retired and they had this dream of sailing. And for those people, look, man, I mean, you worked your ass off your entire life. Just go have fun. Buy a boat and go have fun. Don't
do it before it's too late.
Yeah, and don't worry about working and doing like meaningful blah blah blah. You've already done meaningful. You probably had like a family. You probably like raised kids. You probably did all sorts of meaningful shit in your life. Just enjoy what you got left and just go have some fun. Drink some wine in Spain, sitting on anchor looking at a sunset. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But I came back from a trip around the Americas. I was 30 years old. So, it was like, all right, well, I got my whole life ahead of me. And and I've done like the cruisy thing. I've sailed the whole East Coast, United States, the Bahamas, and this, that, the other. And I wanted to do more because I can, because we all can. It's not that I'm special. If I can do it, anybody can at some level, because I've got a wide variety.
Yeah, but not everybody does. And that's what I think makes you special in a way, is that it's just, anybody can do this. We all have the power to sort of be a little selfless and put a certain percent of our energy towards something for the common good. But the vast majority of us don't do that. And the fact that you do, I think, shouldn't be overlooked. And I'm not trying to like kiss your ass or anything like that. But it is, when I look at what you do and what I do, and we're both sailors, There's vast difference, and it's very impressive to see it, and it's inspirational to me.
No, I appreciate that, but I
take
think
it for what you will.
I would also state that the long distance single handed sailing is inspirational too.
I think so. Yeah,
absolutely, because it can show what the human mind, the body to some lesser extent, but it's really mind. I mean, it's so much of single-handed oceanic, especially long distance. It's so much mental. It's such a mental battle at times, and it's mental strength and determination, perseverance. You could be 4 foot tall. You could be in all sorts of different physical states, but if your mind is in the right place, you'll make it happen.
Yeah.
And I think that people need to see that. People need to understand that the capabilities of humans are, the sky is the limit, and that we can do amazing things when we set ourselves to the goal. And I think it is inspirational. I'm sure you've inspired a lot of people trying to, through whatever your podcast, your book. One of my crew, Costa, just recently on this thing, he read your book. He was like, I only read 2 books recently about sailing I liked, and one of them was he didn't know I know you. It was just random. I was like, drawing around. I was like, yeah, this motherfucker's about to show up my boat. He's going to interview me later, like tomorrow. He's like, what? But yeah,
well,
you're a good writer. Yeah. And Nick was showing me. I told you, Nick Radka. Hey, Nick Radka.
Hey, shout out, Nick.
Yeah, there you go. Nick loves you. But he was playing some of your audio book, which you do yourself. You do the narration of it. And man, I'm a little jealous. I ain't gonna lie. You got a good writing style. I'm a shit. There's a reason my book ain't out yet.
Yeah,
I'm a shit writer.
I literally I was very fortunate. I wanted to, and I succeed. Like I wanted to write a round the world sailing book that was like a fast read. Most people that read it, even people that don't read much at all, they're like, well, I'll read it because it's you, and they'll come back like 3 days later and be like, dude, I read your whole book. It's the first book I've read in 20 years.
Oh, wow.
They're like, it was great. I was like, well, I tried to make it like fast. And the interesting thing.
It's a style of writing.
It is.
It's descriptive. There's the proper use of adjectives. I mean, it's the whole like,
it took
I went
a while
down
to get
below
it. Like,
and I grabbed the thing. And I don't know. It makes you feel like you're there.
But I
have a hard time with that.
There were also little things like, I wanted to do a whole bunch of short chapters. And I'll tell you one thing, because I know you're working on your book and stuff. When I went to try and get a publishing company or a literary agent to then find a publisher and stuff, sent that out. I wasted like a year and a half trying to do that. They were all like, you need to change this, you need to change this. And finally I was like, I thought about Motissier, because I don't think he even let the publishers edit his books.
No, I don't think so. Yeah,
and
The Long Way is a pure book.
Yeah, and I was like, you know what? I mean, this is probably the only book I'm ever gonna write, and it's my trip, and it's such a unique little niche. I mean, yours is even more, because even fewer people have done that, and it's like, and the fact that you're the first person to do it, but like, it's make it your own, and to hell with anybody who doesn't. If anybody tries to change it, and you want it a certain way, dude, just self-publish it on Amazon, dude. It won't cost you
and we're in an era where, like, I had a publishing company try to give me, a deal for the book.
Oh, for the rights?
Yeah. And they want to give me $2,000, and they're going to give me. They wanted the rights to everything. They wanted the movie rights. Yeah, and the motherfucking movie had already been made. Red Dot in the Ocean was count like 4 years, 5 years at that point. It was like, dude, where are you guys at? Like this you want the rights? They're
criminal.
They wanted half of the money for every public speaking event I would do that would mention the trip around the Americas for the rest of my life. Half the money of every speaking gig. Yeah.
Dude, that's gonna be like that's gonna be your retirement fund.
Well, it was just like, it was like, no, this is ridiculous. And then the problem at the end of the day is they still won't promote your book, because the thing about giving money to an author from a publishing standpoint, let's say they give you $50,000, which is a nice chunk to say the least, right?
Yeah.
All right.
A nice little,
so it's not as much
bonus
about the fact that you just got $50,000 for your book. It's about the fact that they have invested in you, and then they want to make their money back, so they're going to promote you. So now they have to promote the book. Now they have to get their money back. And if they give you $2,000, well, what is $2,000?
Nothing.
Yeah, so they're not going to promote it. You're going to end up promoting your own book, doing all the legwork,
and they're just going to
they're going to give you 5% or something. North to the Night, Alva Simon, he wrote a book about sailing up to the Arctic trapped in the ice.
Oh, yeah.
He was getting like 60 cents per book that was sold, and they were selling them for $15 a pop, and he was getting 60 cents. And you could find it at the airport. The little bookstores they used to have at the airports. I don't know if they still do. It's like the only sailing book in history that wound up one of those airport
I know.
things.
I would love to have my book on that.
Yeah, but you're getting 60 cents. He was getting nothing. He was getting nothing. They were getting all the money. They had all the rights and all the rest. So we live in a time now where unless you're who's the lady who wrote Harry Potter? What the hell is that lady's name?
Oh, J.K. Rowling.
Now he wrote didn't he write Game of Thrones? Or was he? Oh, no, she wrote that. What was the Game of Thrones one?
I don't know the Game of Thrones
Well, anyways, whatever the hell these people are, if they wanted to write a book tomorrow, they'd be getting if J.K. Rowling or whatever showed up, it was like, I got an idea. It's a new book, and I'm not going to tell you nothing. I'm not going to give you the first draft. And
or Matthew McConaughey or
want
Obama.
10 million on it.
Yeah,
well, exactly.
Well, and that's why I
But we're
obviously
not that.
I'm not an expert anyway, but like part of the reason I self-published on Amazon was that, I'm not a huge fan of Amazon.
What's the name of the book?
Sailing into Oblivion.
All right.
But I did that because it didn't cost me anything. I could buy authors' copies for not very much money, and they would just sell it, and all I had to do was promote it. And, Jeff takes his cut. He's got a boat. He needs to pay for new sales,
Yeah, he's got
too.
a big boat.
But it
costs a lot to run that boat. I mean, come on now. You gotta give you some sympathetic over here, man. You know how much fuel that thing burns?
Once you get it done, it's out there and it'll sell. And because it's such a unique niche thing, no matter what, all the publishers told me that I wasn't going to sell shit. And that book, it's been on Amazon for 4 years now. It still sells almost every single day.
All right, good.
Yeah,
good
I'm not going to make $1 million off it unless I go on like Joe Rogan's podcast. But like, still, it's gonna. I'm pretty
if you
sure.
got some refit money.
Yeah, I know. It kept me from having to sell the boat for about 2 years when I wasn't making anything else. So, and the nice part is when I do these presentations and stuff like that, we always sell the book afterwards. So it's definitely. I guess the reason I'm going on is that I'm hoping that you slice some time out so you can finish yours, because I know it'll be. I'm
getting there. It's the problem for me is in the self-publishing situation.
Yeah, and that's only a recommendation.
Well, and that's what I'm doing.
I'm sure you'll have more people that want.
No, I don't want to. I'm not going to do that. No, why the fuck would I give most of my money, all my rights to some publishing company that's going to give me nothing?
Right.
It's going to give me, and they're not going to. It's not even that. Beth Leonard told me this years ago, and Beth Leonard sailed around the world twice. Built a Van der Stat Samoa 48 out of aluminum with her husband, sailed around the world, wrote, I think it's like the Voyager's Handbook she wrote one of the best sailing how-to handbooks like in history. She's like it's like a PhD textbook. Like it's like you feel like you're getting your PhD in sailing. Like she gave the best lectures I've ever heard of heavy weather sailing literally you feel like you're in college getting like Neil deGrasse Tyson of like sailing, it was just that detailed. And she said, if I get all the rights back from all my books, I would. And the reality is that nowadays you have to promote your books, even though they get the rights.
Yeah,
and that's the key. It's like, and that's that $50,000 thing I'm talking about. It has nothing to do with the money. It has to do with the fact that now they've invested in you. They have to promote it.
Right.
And if they're not going to promote your book, why not self-publish? At that point, it doesn't make any sense.
Yep.
Because you're gonna do the same amount of work and you're gonna get a fraction of the money.
And then you can keep it exactly how you want it to be, so that it's it's your stamp.
Right.
Whoa, we got some wake.
Yeah,
getting a little seasick. I've been sparrows on the hard down there in North Carolina, so I'm not used to this motion. Well, hey, I hope only to like I said, to fire you up to get that thing out there.
No, it's there. I'm sitting on it a little bit. If I think I gotta pick the right time to put it out. I think if I put it out tomorrow, some people who listen to my podcast would buy it or something like that, and then you'd kind of fizzle out from there. It's like I'm trying to do another big nonstop single-handed trip, and I figure like the best thing for me to do probably is to have that book ready, like loaded in the chamber. I got one in the chamber.
Yeah.
Right when I leave, bam, shoot that shit off. And then, because you're always going to get more people following a big, crazy single-handed trip than a research expedition. From my experience.
I would think so.
Yeah, by far. In my experience.
If you've got Starlink and you can do a couple updates.
Well, no, I mean, Trip Around the
there.
Americas, I didn't have any of that shit.
I know, but it's a different world now, man.
It was a far more people followed that thing than any of the research expeditions. And I don't blame it. I'm not trying to complain. I understand. The draw and appeal of one versus the other, but it would be good to write another book. I think what I'm going to do about all the crazy research expeditions, which would be a good mid-expedition drop. So now you got a second one in chamber. Now you're halfway through. If you make it halfway, right, you might die. But if you make it halfway, I'll give it to my sister, put it in my will. It's release it. You take all the money. But if not, halfway, bam. And then if you're, I don't know if I can do it. Actually, writing the book would be really interesting to me, which I've never done, is try to actually write a book in real time. Because one of the things one of the things I've always respected about writers that I've never been able to do is when you read a book somebody wrote after an expedition and they write it in the manner as if they're writing it from the moment that it happened to them.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to bring myself back in time and make it feel...
That's where you gotta have that journal, man.
Yeah, well, I can't even read my own handwriting. I mean, what am I supposed to do?
Yeah, that is pretty tricky, but you gotta
Going
be
around
diligent.
Americas, I spoke into something. So on that red dot in the ocean, when my boat went upside down in the Bering Sea, my camera broke. I only had one pissy camera. And then the rest of it, you hear audio, and that's from the trip. I was speaking into, my journal was me speaking into a shitty microphone.
Yeah.
So I didn't do a captain's log. My captain's log was speaking instead of writing. So it'd always start off the same. It'd be like, all right, I'm at this latitude, longitude, wind speed, direction, this many miles over 24 hours, all the basic.
Wow.
And then I would talk about whatever happened that day. And I'll try to do it every single day. And a lot of them are dry as shit. Some of them aren't. It depends on where. Some of them are breaking down. And you hear it, and you hear it in the red on the ocean, but you're seeing, instead of seeing footage of me, you're seeing a picture or something, because or B-roll of something. Because my camera broke. But they still had audio from me on the boat during the expedition because that's how I did it. So,
today I did yoga and it brought me to tears.
I did yoga and tears.
I knew it happened. It happens to all of us.
You can't do yoga on an open Vega.
There has to have been some point on some journey somewhere. I know it's happened to me where you look out in that world and something hits you pretty hard and you just tear up a little. You can admit it here. It's all right. Don't worry.
No, I mean,
Nobody's
look, for the first time, I want to tell you the truth, Jerome. I want you to know the real me.
Yeah. Well,
no, I don't know. I don't. There's great moments, but I didn't. I don't know about. Hey, you ever cry on any of those trips?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's been a few times. I think the one where I was just broken was. Down just past New Zealand, Hurricane Gita was bearing down, and my computer just broke. So I couldn't download the weather. And I was becalmed, but there was 10, 12-foot swell. Boats just getting rattled around. It was foggy, and I reached a breaking point. And there was nothing I could do. I couldn't turn back to New Zealand. I had no computer anymore. Sitting on the bottom of the ocean. And again, this was back in the day, but that was one where I broke me. But when the albatross, all that stuff, I don't even like to talk about that. That was pretty rough.
What happened with the albatross?
You'd have to read the book.
Well, God damn it! I don't read.
Well,
no, I'm just joking. Where's come on.
No, I don't.
All right, can I tell you my bird story, my sad bird story?
I know is that the one where you tried to eat it?
No, that's a different. That one wasn't less. I mean, all the Tabasco in the world wouldn't get rid of that nasty flavor. That's not the sad bird story. I got another sad bird story. This one's like a tearjerker. It's serious.
Sure.
I didn't cry when it happened, but I mean, it was a tearjerker. All right, so I've been alone in the ocean for 200 and some days, maybe 260 days, something like that, roughly. And it was in the South Atlantic, coming up, nice weather. And I'm just sitting out there, kind of, I don't know, you've been out there a long time, just kind of staring out, zoning out in the ocean.
Yeah.
And this little land-based bird, you get those land-based birds versus the ocean birds. Land-based birds will land on your boat. Ocean birds don't land on your boat. They just fucking fly around. And I was kind of close to Brazil at the time, sort of. I think that's where it came from. Anyways, it landed right next to me, a foot away from me. And, it's been so long I've been out there, and I didn't have a lot of interaction. You see fish or whales or whatever once in a while or something. Every once in a while, a creature kind of have that bonding moment with that creature. But this thing was right next to me.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I'm like, oh my God, look at this little bird, little cute little bird, walking around chirping and stuff. And I'm feeling all happy. Oh my God, look at me. I'm like hanging out with a bird. Cute little bird. Yeah, I got a buddy. Woo. And it was there for like a good, like probably at least a half hour at least. Now I had a Rutland wind generator. And that's all I had left at this point. My solar panels had broken long before. My engine was broken. The only power I had was that Rutland wind generator. So anyways, we're sitting there and hanging out with this bird. And it's magical experience being part of the ocean and being alone for so long and having this friend, And it promptly flew directly into the wind generator. And the wind generator hit it, and it fucking lobbed it. It bounced it off the floor of my cockpit so hard. It was like, bah! And I saw it bounce and fly right over the lifelines, like in like a split second. Like it flew, it hit it, the fucking bah! Like body slammed it into my, like right next to me in my cockpit. And I'm just sitting there like petrified, like, oh my God.
What have I done?
Well, I didn't do nothing. I mean, I'm just sitting there as the damn flew into my wind generator. Anyways, that was my. I didn't cry about it, but I was in shock. I was like, "Holy shit!"
Oh, I'm sure.
I sat there for a minute, like frozen. Like, what happened? I tried to look overboard to see if I could see it in the wake or something.
Yeah.
I didn't see it in the wake. It was the end of that bird.
Well, I'm sure it didn't go to waste.
But I cried before my first single-handed transatlantic because I kept having issues, and I was like so geared up. And before I even left the Chesapeake, I was going north and then down through the C&D Canal down to Delaware to sail over to. I was trying to get to Iceland. I never made it there. I made it to Ireland instead. But I had the flax packing on my rudder shaft go out on me, which is thank fucking God it went out on me in the Chesapeake and not in the ocean.
Yeah,
I actually really lucked out. But it kind of broke down, and I cried out of frustration for that. But I never did once going around the Americas. There was no. I've learned to like. I don't know if I've learned to like that. That maybe that's not the right way to say it, but I maybe decided. I don't know. If you have high highs, you're gonna have low lows emotionally.
Yeah.
And if I was like emotionally like a horse with blinders, I was like a kiddie ride at an amusement park. Because if I allowed myself to get up high, then it would be like a roller coaster, potentially. Where if I allowed myself to get too happy, then I could go too sad. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
I didn't want to feel that spectrum, so I stayed emotionally neutral through that entire trip. And there was obviously good times and bad times, and times where you scream, you smash this or whatever it is. I mean, that all happened. Beautiful moments with birds before they die in your wind generator or whatever it is, right? You have these situations, but I kept myself in that kind of neutral, emotionally neutral sort of realm.
You trained your brain into that,
I guess. Yeah. I was able to stay there. So I never had too high of a higher, and therefore I never had too low of a low. So therefore I never cried about anything. But I had accepted death too. It was in a very good place before I left, in a bad place. It took a bad place to make a good place.
Yeah.
Like I had there was a lot of fucked up emotional baggage going into that trip that allowed me or helped me. I had nothing to lose.
Yeah.
So therefore, but at the same time, even if you got nothing to lose, doesn't mean you're going to face death. Like,
you bring it on.
Yeah. If I live, I live. If I die, fuck it. I'm going to go for it, and then nothing's going to stop me, or it will, or whatever. If it's going to stop me, it's going to sink me, essentially.
Yeah.
So I was able to remain in that area, and I don't know. I think I would probably be able to get back in there if I did it again. It would be nice. It would be really nice. I'd really like to I like to spend a year alone in the ocean again. That would be wonderful, and go through. I love to do the figure eight. I'd really like to give that a whack, because after going around Cape Horn, I thought about it.
Yeah, right.
I checked. I spent 2 days. I went through all my supplies. Went through all my food. I spent 2 days seeing if I could do it, and I came back like, Matt, you idiot.
Yeah,
your boat's been taken on water for 4,000 miles.
I was gonna say, dude,
you're lucky if you're gonna make it back. You're like, just go back to Annapolis, dude.
Yeah.
So all right, fine. I'll go back to Annapolis. But yeah, I wouldn't have made it in the Southern Ocean on that boat for that long. I spent, I don't know, whatever. I stayed at below 40 for a while. I think it was like 5 weeks or something like that. I stayed down there for a long time, partially because at one point I was 200 miles closer to New Zealand than I was to Cape Horn.
Yeah,
so,
right.
And then the other part was because when I made that when I turned north in the Southern Atlantic, I wanted to go due north. I wanted to make a 90-degree turn essentially and go due north. I didn't want to run up the coast. I wanted to stay in the middle of the South Atlantic because the wind conditions were going to be more favorable if I was sort of out in the middle of it, essentially.
Well, you got to get some good easting in because, you still have to make it past the tip of Brazil.
Yeah, I was
further north.
300 miles from South Georgia where Shackleton died before I turned north. I stayed down there for a while.
Yeah.
So whatever. I mean, the Southern
Ocean. I was
Ocean.
like, get me north! Immediate. I almost went through that channel. There's an island
what
Staten
they call Staten Island.
Yeah.
No, I did not go. Yeah,
I was like,
the outside.
It looks like a lot of currents in there.
Who's that woman, that English single-handed girl who broke a bunch of records? God, do you know what I'm talking about?
Dame Ellen MacArthur,
yes,
maybe?
Dame Ellen MacArthur. You ever hear her do a talk?
She does a lot about single-use plastics. She used to at least. Yeah.
She did a talk about, I don't know, it was like one of these inspiration-y sort of talks dealing with that trip, that circumnavigation she did.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ, she's a good speaker.
I know. She's really good.
She makes me feel like a caveman or something.
Well, you are a bit of a caveman.
Yeah, that's probably true.
But that's good. It's your own style, though. That's what you got to have.
Yeah, well, we all got to stay with our roots.
I'm telling you, one of these days, and I know I'm going to leave you here soon because I got to start getting out of here. But I do think one of these days it'd be really cool to sit down and get on stage with you and do a little Q&A. I've always thought it'd be great to have the 3 R's: Rutherford, Rand, and Reeves.
Yeah, you were talking about
Q&A
doing it.
panel. Yeah,
we've missed the mark a little bit because there used to be before I went around the Americas, there used to be like national tours of speaking circuits with sailing. Yeah, and it stopped like a year before I got back or something. Like Cruising World and these magazines used to host it, and people would go around to different yacht clubs and do this shit.
I think they're, maybe we
could do a next boat show. What you do a next boat show? I could easily set that up. I could set up I can get us the venue at the boat show at the very least.
You mean Annapolis?
Yeah, it's the best boat show in the country.
Should be.
We might be able to get I got a double room this year. It was like 300 seating. I don't know what it was, but I got the double room.
We'll have to
see. I bet you I could get it Chesapeake, the School of Seamanship. I bet you I can. If you guys want to, I'm going to be here. I do a talk because they give me a badge. Quite frankly, it's my free way to get into the boat show is I do a talk. Well, I got other ways to do it, but I do a talk.
I firmly believe that a lot of places would pay for a panel like that. But I'm learning just how difficult it is to actually piece together like a speaking tour. This one, I'm about to go finish this one up. I picked up another one in December down in Florida, but 8 to 10 talks over the last month and a half. And I'm doing it all on my own. It's not easy by any means, and it's not like a huge revenue thing until you get to like the level that Dame Ellen MacArthur's at.
Yeah, we'll never get there. I'm sorry.
I think I will.
Yeah, no.
But
you won't. No, you won't.
Hey, I'm pretty good up on stage. You'd have to,
Yeah.
Unfortunately, almost all the ones I do are private. I'm sure I could maybe sneak somebody in at one point, but if I'm ever doing a talk,
I think she's smarter than both of us combined.
Oh, she definitely is. But it's not about your smarts. It's about
but in her English accent, she's got that great English accent. Just makes her seem, the whole thing is perfect. You listen to her, and you're like, oh my God, what is this?
Yeah,
what have I been doing with my life?
I'm working on my my sort of corporate speaking stuff.
Why don't you just sail to Greenland next year, and we could do podcasts all the time?
Well, who knows?
See?
We'll have to see.
I know you like doing it in person. How much more in person can you be?
I know.
You won't be able to get away from me at that point.
Yeah, that's what I'm afraid of.
Yeah, you should be.
Well, hey, can I ask you a favor? Can you just do a shout out to my old man? He's a huge fan of yours and has been for a very long time. His name is Jim, and he's sailed on the. He's a kindred spirit because when he set off on Mighty Sparrow when I bought it to sail from Jupiter, Florida down to the BVI. It was the sea trial. That was the first time we ever took it. And we did that sea trial. After 2-3 days, we had sucked water into the diesel.
Oh, shit.
So we lost the engine. And we talked about pulling into the Bahamas because we were right there. And he was like, nah, just let's sail. It's a sailboat.
His name Jim?
Uh-huh, yeah.
Jim Rand, you raised a good son. Good job.
Thank you very much, Matt. I appreciate it.
Yeah, well, hell, not many people get to raise a proper single-hander.
That's true, but every once in a while, I think after I did a trip around the world, there's a little jealousy behind those eyes sometimes.
Well, of course there is. And you rub it in every chance you get. Every chance you get. Like, oh, yeah?
Yeah, right. Well, thank you so much for having me on.
And next time we got to figure out what you're doing next.
Yeah, I know.
We never even got to
we'll
that
have
shit.
to get into that. I'm trying to figure that out, man.
Except going to Greenland and lowering a probe a ridiculous amount of times in a row.
I know, dude.
It's so gorgeous up there, dude.
It's
fucking gorgeous. Beautiful icebergs and glaciers, and it's just gorgeous.
What I'm at right now
Insane mountains.
You know how what are you
gonna do? What are you gonna do? Work at a boatyard? As opposed to looking at the most glorious raw nature on planet Earth while doing science and all that shit.
I'm desperately trying to find that burning desire for the next thing to do. You know that feeling where you're like, that's what I have to do.
Yeah, yeah.
You know it well. I know it well. I don't have it right now, and I need to find it.
It's a gift and a curse.
I know it is. But I believe life is so much better when you have that absolute goal, that challenge that you've got to take on, and that goal you have to reach, because it gives everything in your life a purpose. But you got to find it, and it's got to be an honest one, because if you can't lie to yourself when it comes down to that.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm trying to figure that out.
You could get married and have 5 kids. And a mortgage.
You know what? I was thinking about it the other night, right? And when guys like you and I have been technically irresponsible with our time, not focusing on like a career right from the get-go so that we're secure and safe in our old age. We've focused on trying to enjoy and have these experiences so that when we're old, we don't look back and question like, oh, geez. Well, now we could go and get jobs, normal jobs, because we never have to wonder what it would have been like if I would have chose to go around the world.
No, we don't have to worry. We really don't have to worry about it at all, because there are old men and there are bold men, but there are not old, bold men. We ain't going to get there.
I think we
got a date with Davy Jones' locker.
No, I don't know about that. Who knows?
Yeah,
although I was pretty close on this last one, so we'll have to
hey man, acceptance is important.
I know. Hey, it took me a while. It took me over 2 weeks before I could look at the footage from this last trip.
No, that sounds fucking brutal, man. It sounds brutal. When it happened early on like that, that's just It's just. I know.
But hey.
Hey, well, it's a testament to the wind opposing the current.
Yeah,
and that is one of the most dangerous situations you can possibly have. There was a giant catamaran in a boat show that 10 days ago sunk, and they got rescued in a life raft because they went on a Gulf Stream in nor'easter. The year before, Beneteau 60 went out there, same thing, blew out of the north.
I remember that. Yeah.
They got ripped off like the rudder and the mast. Now it's a Beneteau 60, so Beneteaus, it doesn't take much to rip off the rudder and the mast on them.
Now.
Yeah. But anyways, this you gotta be you gotta the ocean is an interesting place because it's always going to be so much more powerful than you are, and there is no maybe somebody could walk on top of a mountain and be like, I conquered this mountain, which of course you didn't conquer the mountain.
No, mountain's still there.
Yeah, but there's no. But the ocean can be flat, calm one day, and mountains the next. Mm-hmm. And they avalanche, when they want to.
And it'll outlast any boat.
And the ocean will always be in control. Well, and you never can. The best thing I think you can do in the ocean is coexist. Coexist is like the peak of the highest form that you can do in the ocean. Yep. You'll never beat it. You never conquer it. You're always a weakling. You're a tiny little speck compared to its raw power. But if you can coexist and find a way to do it, then you can sail anywhere.
I don't think you're gonna have any trouble finishing this book when you talk.
But I don't fucking. I write like
it's
shit.
Recorded. It's recorded. There we go. You'll just record the audio version. Yeah. All right, Matt. Well, I've bothered you enough, man. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
It's about time. It's about damn time.
And it's not the first. We'll definitely. I feel like you and I could sit down and bang out a couple 3-hour podcasts pretty easily. And if we had like specific
if you weren't driving
subjects
somewhere, I'd get you some proper booze.
Yeah, I know.
You gotta be all careful. I've been polishing this bottle.
Yeah, I know, right? Thank you for the hospitality. Yep. Thanks for the great stories and everything. And definitely I will, anytime I'm out on the East Coast or we're in the same place, we'll have to sit down again. And who knows what the future will hold. I'll just say that.
Yeah, man. Who knows? See you in Greenland.